Meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, January 3rd, 2017, and the time is 7 p.m. Dr. Hillman, there were a few items in the table file.
Yes, we just have a couple of additions this evening in terms of the PowerPoint presentation for this evening's Arcadia and Prairie Creek presentation, as well as just a couple of personnel items.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. We now have an opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for anyone residing in the Northfield Public School District to address the board. Is there anyone here who wishes to address the board? So seeing no one come forward, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packet minutes from both the organizational meeting and the regular school board meeting held on Monday, January 9th, 2017. Is there a motion to approve these sets of minutes? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Rob. Okay. Any discussion or comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the organizational meeting and the regular school board meeting held on Monday, January 9th, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, we have several announcements and recognitions this evening. First, we want to congratulations to high school sophomore Logan Ledman. Logan is the 2017 Northfield VFW Post 4393 Voice of Democracy essay first place winner in District 1, and this encompasses southeastern Minnesota. Logan went on to compete this past weekend at the state VFW competition, where his essay and speech on the subject of My Responsibility to America earned him second place out of 9 state VFW district champions. There was a really nice article earlier in January in the Northfield News about all the students with the contest winning essays reading to the Northfield Veterans of Foreign Wars post on January 11th. The theme for this year for high school students was My Responsibility to America, while the theme for middle school students was The America I Believe In. So congratulations to Logan Ledman. Northfield High School had 41 students participate in the district competition held on January 13th, 2017 in Owatonna, Minnesota. This is for DECA. From the group, 22 students qualified for the DECA State tournament. It's not tournament or meet. Not exactly sure what the term is, but DECA State on March 19th through the 21st. Northfield received many first, second, and third places in the students' events. Qualifying students include Paulina Amaro, Jenny Bakken, Ariana Beebe, Evan Clay, Sophia Corneliuson, Dylan Kudermash, Alita Dice, Jack Fox, Tommy Gallagher, Mikhail Geisler, Maxwell Gordon Mercer, Delina Halib, Henry Hofstad, Gage Hofstad, Aaron Lopez, Finn Muir, Griffin Rod, Brian Rodriguez, Dylan Roney, Reed Roney, Tana Sears, and Jason Waitala. And the DECA chapter's also been very busy in January fundraising for Flint, Michigan to help supply bottled water to the town. The Northfield music listening team swept the top 3 places at the regional contest on Friday, January 20th at Mankato East. The broken record in music listening, another sweeping of the region. Micah Johnson and Elena Falk and junior Elizabeth Peterson had the top score of 86 of 100 and will represent Northfield at the state contest at Augsburg College on February 3rd. Northfield team number 1 with seniors Rose Mybus, Chloe Schweitz, and Lib Bar scored 84 of 100, and team 3 with senior Amy Imediki, sophomore Trey Coudray, and freshman Ryan Mybus scored 71 of 100 and tied with Owatonna for 3rd place. Our radio and music listening teams have a long-standing history of advancing to the state contest, and we're very proud of our current teams for their outstanding performance last Friday. Plowshares is pleased to announce that We Live Closer Together and We Live Far Apart by Rob Hardy, our school board member, appears in the winter 2016-17 issue of Plowshares. This staff-edited issue features a vibrant collection of essays, poems, and short stories that reminds us that below the surface there is always something unseen. Plowshares has published quality literature since 1971. Best known for its award-winning literary magazine, which is published 3 times a year with 2 issues guest-edited by a prominent author, they also publish Plowshare Solos, digital first long stories and essays, and a lively literary blog. Since 1989, Plowshares has been based at Emerson College in downtown Boston. Dr. Hardy is not only a member of our school board, but he's also a research associate in classics at Carleton College and the first poet laureate of Northfield, Minnesota. His essays have appeared in the New England Review, North Dakota Quarterly, New Letters, Critical Flame, and other literary and scholarly journals. So congratulations, Dr. Hardy, on that auspicious honor. And then finally, Northfield Middle School hosted the Minnesota Twins Caravan today. And of course, TC Bear was featured, as well as Byron Buxton, Trevor May, and of course, a perennial all-star in his day, Tony Oliva. And we all want to remind everyone, despite the weather coming up later this week, it is only 21 days until spring training. So those are your announcements and recognitions for this evening.
Excellent, thank you. Some good ones. So are there any other comment items? I'm sorry, Margaret, go ahead.
Perhaps the report is coming with more details, but our high school choral programs also participated this week in small group ensemble contests in Lakeville, and I understand they did extremely well, including several best in sites. So.
Yeah, I know that they were there Saturday, and it was a number of all the music pros, so I'm sure we'll be getting the report coming soon. But I think it was a long day with many kids getting up at 5:30 for the start of that day, so including 2 unhappy kids at my house who had to get up that early. So.
And one very unhappy child at my house too. Yeah. Excellent, thank you for mentioning that. Other mentions? Rob?
I wanted to mention that unfortunately last Monday night, the Martin Luther King Jr. Community celebration was canceled because of the ice, but it's been rescheduled to this Thursday evening at 7 o'clock at Emmaus Church, so I hope people will come out for that. Father Dennis Dempsey will be getting the Human Rights Award for the year, and there'll be readings and performances. It'll be a great evening. Thanks.
Okay, good. Other items? Okay, we will move on to, because it is the second meeting of the month, we'll move on to committee reports. As you know, that's an opportunity for board members to report on committee work that they do as school board liaisons. I think the only one actually this week is mine, which was in your table file.
And I apologize for not mentioning it.
No, that's right. The meeting was on Friday, so I wasn't able to submit it until this morning. But anyway, on Friday, Dr. Hillman and I were able to attend C's general membership meeting. And you know, C is Schools for Equity and Education, which is a group we are a part of. And the highlight of the meeting was actually two guest speakers, Senator Carla Nelson from Rochester, who is the chair of the E12 Finance Committee and also a former teacher, as well as Senator Eric Pratt, Republican from Prior Lake, who is currently chair of the E12 Policy Committee. He is also a longtime school board member at Prior Lake. He was on the board for, I believe, 12 years. So it was really interesting to have them there. We certainly appreciated that legislators are very busy and really ramping up their schedule and lots of meetings, but they did take time to come to talk to everyone who was there. So it was interesting to hear what some of their, what they deem as sort of their priority issues for the session. And while they very closely matched the C's legislative 2017 platform, that was good to hear as well. But some of their priorities included addressing teacher shortage with teacher licensing reforms, maximizing dual credit programs, and they also highlighted the special education cross subsidy, which is estimated to be $719 million statewide over the next 2 years. So those seemingly priorities, they also understood the importance that I think we've all sort of driven home the message of providing an increase to the basic funding formula. In fact, Senator Nelson's remarks was, I've heard the importance of the funding formula loud and clear. So it was really interesting and really good to hear that they understand that. It was a little interesting also, they did temper their support of these priorities, certainly by acknowledging the state's pent-up interest in tax credit and transportation. So while I think they were trying to say, you know, we understand that education is always a priority for Minnesotans, and they feel really a bipartisan issue, they had to temper that, of course, with competing priorities, which we all know they have a lot of competing priorities. So it was, again, a really good opportunity for us to hear from these chairs of two very important education committees. They C also reminded, as part of our membership with C, Deb Griffiths, who's the outreach coordinator, always has a C day at the Capitol for districts. And so our particular day at the Capitol is Tuesday, March 14th, and we would have the opportunity as school board members, parents, community members that we can recruit to come with us and meet our local legislators. So, again, while we understand that they're very busy schedules, we certainly appreciated the opportunity to hear from them. And I think we really understand the importance of advocating at the legislature for what we need in education. And I think tonight, actually, as we speak, the governor is doing his State of the State speech, and his budget is supposed to be released tomorrow, of which the education committees are meeting on Wednesday, and they said that would be their top priority, is to start digging through the governor's bill and deciding where they'll move forward on their education targets, et cetera. So. One other thing that I know as board members we particularly appreciate is the weekly updates we get from Schools for Equity and Education in terms of what's happening at the session. So that was that meeting. So if there's any questions? Okay, well, we will move on then. Our first item for report, we are fortunate tonight to have both Prairie Creek and Arcadia Charter School here doing their annual reports. Just a reminder to board members, there was a PowerPoint in the table file. So we have Simon Tyler, Executive Director of Prairie Creek, will begin.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to give you an update on how things are going on in our charter schools. Our plan this evening is to follow the same format we have for the last few years at this annual report. That you have a summary data sheet, just a two-sided piece of paper, which has Prairie Creek basic updates on one side, some accountability information and some initiatives going on, and Arcadia on the other side. And then during our presentations, we'll open that up a little bit into some more information. It's really my honor tonight to be here with my colleague Barb Wanson from Arcadia. I'm really excited for the opportunity to partner with Barb. I've known Barb for a long time, and she was actually my mentor when I was going through my principal's license process, so it's really fun to be working with you again, Barb. Tonight, also for the last few years, we've taken the opportunity of these meetings to try and give you an insight into some innovative element of our program. In previous years, we've talked about the project process, thematic study, and so on. Tonight's focus will be on how we emphasize and incorporate the arts into our programs. So for this evening's presentation, in that spirit, Barb and I will be presenting in the form of an interpretive dance. Barb doesn't know this, but it's okay. That was it. I could see the fear in your eyes. It's not going to happen. But I will start with Prairie Creek's overview, and then later in the presentation, two of our teachers who do a lot of work in the arts will come up and talk about that. So we'll talk about innovative arts programming. We do have a very active subcommittee for the arts at Prairie Creek. The lead teacher for that is Nancy Dennis, and also our visual arts teacher, Angie Ecken, is here this evening. And also we have with us Bonnie Jean Flom, who is a community member at Prairie Creek and a vice chair of our school board, and as many of you know, a very active person in the arts in this community herself. So thanks for coming, Bonnie Jean. A little bit about our program tonight for Prairie Creek. I'll review with you our mission, our programs, some information on current initiatives and happenings this year, and then we'll hand over to the arts. As I go through our presentation, I've been reflecting in preparation for this evening that we are in a new contract with our authorizer. This is the first year of our new 5-year contract that was negotiated with your board last year, and I just want to look back for a moment and once again thank the Northfield School Board, in particular Dr. Richardson and Dr. Hillman, for the countless hours they put into not only supporting our contractual process, but going through the process of becoming reauthorizing as a district, and that's a tremendous amount of work. In your data sheet, you'll also see that it adjusted our goals. One of the components of our new contract was to rethink the 5-year goals that we established. It's a little different format from in the past. So on the data sheet, I highlighted the 4 for us, world's best workforce goals. And really, this is our first year at seeing how these are going to work, how we're going to turn those into sort of annual data points for us at Prairie Creek going forward from this point. Our mission hasn't changed at Prairie Creek since the school was established in 1983. We still have the same 4 pillars of our mission, that we're a community school, child-centered, we're a progressive school, and we aim to make the world a better place. I think a couple of elements of this program tonight will highlight mission pieces. The arts are very much integral to the progressive education process. And we've also, and I'll talk about this a few slides down, been talking a lot in our school around social justice issues and where we are as a school in that conversation. And that has caused us to have a lot of reflection about that 4th pillar of Prairie Creek aims to make the world a better place, and just what does that mean, what does that look like right now. Our academic program has pretty much stayed the same in structure since we expanded in 2009. 2009, we grew from 120 to 180 students and established this structure of multi-age classes. 3 teams, if you like, where the teachers work very collaboratively. There's 3 teachers, 3 classrooms in each multi-age band of kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd, 3rd grade, and 4th, 5th grade. And the 3 teachers work very collaboratively together. And then we create opportunities for multi-age experiences, often through the arts, K through 5. We also have specialist teachers in the areas of art, music, and Spanish. And it's nice to have one of those here this evening. And 3 special education teachers. In addition, for the last few years, we've had a small but important Title I math and reading intervention program through some funding we've had, and we have 1 intervention specialist. By the way, there will be a space for questions at the end of our presentations, but if you feel the urge to jump in, that's okay. Key characteristics of progressive education. I think I probably always stand up here and say the same thing, that is need a lot more time than you probably have in your board meeting to really dig deep into what progressive education is. Some core characteristics are listed here, that we provide a flexible learning space for the children, both inside, outside the building, and through opportunities to learn on field trips and spaces beyond our school. There's an emphasis on environmental education, children being outside learning. Play is key to what we do. I've already mentioned the multi-age structure in the school, so in addition to the multi-age classrooms, we look for other opportunities for children to learn together from children outside their grade. We have a system at our school called bird buddies. Each class at our school is named after a bird. So every child has 2 bird buddies from 2 different classes. They meet to do activities, social curriculum pieces, and we gather together once a week in our bird buddy order. It also presents a very nice sort of structure for doing things. We're engaged in an opera residency at the moment, and our bird buddy teams, our 3 teams of K through 5 children, have been working together with their guests from St. Olaf College. Interdisciplinary themes and projects. While we tend to approach a lot of literacy and math as discrete subjects, we largely go to the social studies and sciences through interdisciplinary themes. So all classes are engaged in themes throughout the years. And I think that's a core value of progressive education. So the breakdown of subjects is something which is challenged, and we look for opportunities for children to see that and engage in learning through across different curricular areas. And also personal projects. We've shared a little bit for those of you who've been on the board when I've come before about what the honors project, personal projects look like at our school. Creativity is a key theme. I'll talk a little bit about evaluation in the next slide, but we're really watching children and watching our teaching practice for opportunities for allow children to be creative, to have opportunities to explore their creativity in everything they do at our school. Inquiry is a core value of progressive education. Capacity to ask questions, critical thinking to problem solve, is something we're looking to create situations where that can happen throughout the day. And finally, play. We've done a lot of professional development around play over the years, and I think there's a lot of literature, research out there to support just how much children learn, both through structured and unstructured play opportunities. So we look carefully at our day and find time for children to be playing both inside and outside under the watchful eye of the teacher, because that's a big piece of the evaluation to see how children interact with each other in a play situation. So that takes us a little bit to evaluation, and you have, I always think Prairie Creek as a progressive public school, we're in this very interesting place. I think that we're always working hard to articulate that we are a public school and we are accountable to the same standards, the same Minnesota tests as other public schools, and we acknowledge that and know that, but by the same token, we're looking at understanding children in ways just beyond summative assessments. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what does that mean. Some of it is a de-emphasis of standardized assessments in terms of importance. Again, our children participate in them. You have the data in front of you. We're accountable to that very public data. But alongside it, we're really trying to have conversations with children, with parents, with our community, about more of a human discourse, if you like, about the child, and how can we really understand the whole child if we do want to go beyond the standardized assessments. So that incorporates a lot of formative assessment, incorporates a lot of teacher observation, a pretty rigorous structure of parent-child-teacher conferences 3 times a year. And instead of grades, we have a process of the teachers writing written narratives around the children. We're actually doing that right now for the upcoming winter conferences. So the advantage of a written narrative for us is that it takes us outside, the tests of a fairly narrow band of math and literacy, and into an opportunity for the teacher to think very deeply about that whole child, socially, emotionally, and academically. The downside for the teachers, as Nancy will probably attest, is the amount of time it takes to write 20 written narratives, but I think the parents really appreciate it. Finished this morning. I'll check on that tomorrow. Yeah, no, I didn't know. Other ways we assess a child, we look at the process of learning. So in order to do that, the children need to be participating in presentations, culminating events, performances, so we can see for ourselves how the child has learned, and they can see it too, and reflect upon how they're doing and set growth targets. We use a few other constructs. The 16 Habits of Mind is a common tool we use to think about the child's social, emotional growth, and have a language in which to articulate both to the child and the parent on how the student is developing. We have a strategic planning process. We have a 4-year strategic plan, and we're currently in the 3rd year of that process at the moment. It was set up through a board, faculty, parent collaboration. We monitor our strategic work through a board committee structure around the 3 key plan areas, which is the education program, outreach, how we're sharing our progressive mission, and community engagement and sustainability, which takes us a little bit to the finance piece and how we're making our program a sustainable model. So a few things we're focusing on strategically this year. In our education program, this part of the strategic plan is largely driven by the teachers themselves. We have a process of professional development where the teachers are in committees designing the work around strategic goals. And this year we're taking a deep look at our thematic study process, particularly through the lens of curriculum mapping, social studies and science. Math And typically math or literacy is on one of these goals. Math this year, we're going to go for a lesson study process, do a review of number talks, and we have a focus on fractions coming up as well. And then the third one is social justice. I'll come back to that one in a moment. And you can see the two other areas. Often the areas will encompass more in the way of support from our board and parents. Outreach, progressive education networking, legislative outreach, and parent education. And then the community engagement has a lot of our work around fundraising initiatives, leadership sustainability, and building off our alumni connections. It's a small community that's very important to us. So I'll highlight just a few of these strategic areas for you. In social justice, as I mentioned earlier, we write in our mission that we aim to make the world a better place. We've had a lot of conversation over the last couple of years as a faculty around social justice issues of race, poverty, gender. We've read, we did a faculty book club reading Waking Up White around white privilege. We've read many articles together. And part of that process, some of it was very concrete, just really studying the curriculum we have, the materials we have in our building, what our building and our school looks like from a race perspective. This year we really wanted to explore our statement around mission. So we engaged in a board faculty review. We watched some video of a panel of experts on social justice topics together. And we're now at the point of forming a subcommittee really to dig deep into what we say about aiming to make the world a better place and really giving that more of an updated context, I think, in terms of what does equity mean, what does poverty mean here in 2017, what are the race issues here in our community and in Minnesota and the nation as a whole. So that works in process. From a teacher perspective, we have a teacher-led committee that brings articles, focus areas. We've done work on different scenarios that might affect children in the classroom. We've most recently been examining what are the opportunities to authentically bring social justice topics into our progressive education curriculum. One example of that would be, I mentioned the opera earlier, and we'll come back to that in the arts conversation. This year we decided we'd have an immigration theme for our opera. We were in a lot of conversations about race and what it means to live in this country, having come here from somewhere else. And that's at first seemed a bit ambitious, but then started to make sense to us. So it's kind of the conversations are opening our eyes to the possibilities for our teaching and curriculum. Another big strategic piece I mentioned was the importance of us sharing our progressive education pedagogy with others. We're very passionate about what we do at Prairie Creek, and we do look for opportunities to engage with other educators around ideas. So last fall we hosted our first education conference. This took several months planning, but it was a wonderful experience. We had over 100 educators in our school from traditional charter private schools, some educators from out of state. Dr. Hillman brought a team of leaders from the Northfield district, which was fantastic. We had a panel of experts on social justice topics, and then our faculty committed to all leading workshops on progressive education topics, and they were joined by guest presenters. It was really just a very exciting, very energizing day with just terrific conversation, and hopefully it'll be repeated at some point if we can pull it off again. There's a lot of work, but it's fantastic fun. Another strategic piece is teacher leadership sustainability. I think a big tie into that was we did decide last year to apply for the QComp program, and we were accepted, and this is our first year as a QComp program, so we're really finding our way from From a teacher leadership opportunity, what's been exciting for me is it's provided funding and resources for 4 teacher lead roles in our school, 1 QComp coordinator and 3 peer coach leads. And the additional funding that we get as a QComp school, I think it's around $254 a student for a charter school, something like that. Matt can probably correct me if that's off. Is that it provided money for us to engage those leads in cognitive coaching training programs. It provided funding for substitute teachers to be in the school for peer coach opportunities, and the structure around that. Oh, excuse me. And and I clicked something which went awry. Sorry, Bruce.
That's all right.
If I
Simon, just take the mouse that's
Yeah.
down below and click right in the middle.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And there's a stipend piece for teachers to receive as well out of this process. So we were very much finding our way. We're doing a lot of the QComp training opportunities for new programs. I think this is very much a learning year. One of the components of QComp is to establish a school-wide goal for growth, that you're going to impact student achievement. And our trend data suggests that math made best sense as that focus. So some of our work around lesson study, number talks, is designed to inform our instructional practice in math, which in turn we intend will support student growth in math as well. So I imagine in a year's time I'll be coming back and sort of updating on the impact of this program. In these first months, it's been exciting to see the coaching which is happening in the building in a very structured and well-supported way. Professional development, I'll be pretty quick with this slide, but you can see key areas that are happening this year. Math, social justice, we've incorporated a lot of the theme study work into that, and literacy as well. We have basically a 2-year cycle of reviewing the standards. So this year our committee structure looks at math standards, social studies, and language arts standards. So that's a 2-hour meeting once a week, but very much teacher-led, and each committee is given time to design a sort of narrative arc and prepare the professional development sessions for their colleagues. We'll jump now into the arts at Prairie Creek, and in a moment I'll just talk about music for a second here, and then Nancy Dennis, our art committee lead teacher, will come up and talk to you along with Angie, our visual arts teacher. Our music teacher, Olivia, is not here this evening, but music is obviously a core component of the arts. So children have twice weekly music classes. A few years ago, we started a 4th and 5th grade orchestra, and that's been a wonderful addition to our school. We have 24 of our 60 4th and 5th graders are currently in the orchestra with Olivia. And I love our 5th graders also. We appreciate the opportunity for them to participate in the Northfield 5th grade band, and they take advantage of that. And with the orchestra and other events, we've really made music integral to a lot of what we do in the big community celebrations. With Bruce's help, I would just key up 1 minute, if you'd allow me, of our orchestra practicing this morning. We're preparing for our opera performance tomorrow evening, and our orchestra, you have to excuse my dismantled stuff here, and our orchestra has been working with St. Olaf students to prepare and perform an overture, which was written by one of the St. Olaf College students who's been working for us on the opera. And they were practicing this morning. I got a little video of it, and it was so delightful I couldn't really resist bringing it this evening. So I hope you can see and hear this. It's about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes. I should have said that was music teacher Olivia playing along with them this morning. So that's what they're going to be playing, weather permitting, at the beginning of the opera tomorrow evening. Thanks, Grace. So now I'm going to hand over to Nancy and Angie, and they're going to talk a little bit more about the arts at our school.
This down a little bit. Thank you for having us. I'm going to talk a little bit about our annual art night at our school called True Colors. This year will be our 8th annual True Colors, I believe, 7th or 8th. And I'm going to kind of talk about the overall feel and then highlight some of the details. And when I started writing about True Colors to think about what I wanted to communicate tonight, my list got very long, many pages. And so I'm going to try to narrow this down and capture just a few of the magical moments that happen. So our True Colors nighttime event is a nighttime event where families come together to celebrate the arts at our school. And they do this through the creative process, and as well as observing artwork from their children. So, and we'll talk more about this later, but over the last few years, we've been able to connect our residencies with our nighttime event, which has been a beautiful way to, additional way to share our residencies with our families. So we'll talk more about that in detail. So basically our art night is, when the families come to our art night, the school is transformed into an art gallery. And this, so we try to display all the artwork in the hallways, so the walls become the gallery spaces. And so parents can kind of view the work. But something that is even more meaningful that we try to do is we try to communicate the process of creating with families. And we do that in numerous ways, but we try to share the story of their learning and the story of the process. And we do this, so when there's a display, it's not just the artwork. We have visuals of the children working, stories of things that emerged during the process of creating. The lessons take a long time to create. We do lessons that take a month or two for one lesson. And so it's really important to us to share that process, because that's where the heart of it is, to get to this end result. So that's one of my favorite things about True Colors is being able to share those stories with parents and families and photos of them working. Along with the walls transforming into a gallery for our night, I think I'm going to go to the next slide here. The school is also, there's a numerous stations set up around the school to share the creative process. And this is, each year it's different kinds of things that we're doing in the art stations, we call them. And the purpose of this is to share the techniques of what we've learned. So we try to connect what the children have learned throughout that school year and do those techniques at the stations. And one of my favorite things about this is the children become the teachers for their families. In art class, we have a rhythm, a way of talking to the children to help them feel that they are truly artists in their heart, and that our differences are what make us so unique. And we focus on things like art takes time, and we all work at our own pace. And we all have our own unique way of doing things, and all of our art will look different, even if we're doing a similar lesson. And we talk about this in depth, and we do this every day. So the children are very well versed in this, and they feel, you can feel it, you can see it in them. They truly feel that they are artists. And so I think that one of my favorite things about True Colors, and I think what is the heart of it all, is to walk into a room, and you can see this picture here, and it's parents and children and grandparents all creating together, but the children are teaching the skills to their parents and to their siblings. And we talk with the children about this beforehand, how sometimes we have these fears in art, and especially as adults, something along the way has blocked us from thinking that we can do these things. And the children are, because of the way that we talk about art in our school and in our art room, they're able to do that with their parents. And then you walk into these rooms and you see these parents going, oh my gosh, I can do this. And the children are talking to them like we would talk to them in the classroom. And that is probably my favorite moment at True Colors are those are just magic. The magic's happening. So I think that was all I wanted to say for that part. And then over the last few years, the residencies have become woven into so this is kind of the foundation with the gallery and the art stations and families creating together. But over the years, we've been able to weave in our residencies. So for example, and we'll talk more about this too, but a couple of years ago, we had Heart of the Beast. They do the big paper mache puppets. And at our True Colors nighttime event, we had a parade where we got to use the puppets we made, and we had this parade around our whole school, and it was just amazing. We had this drummer come in, and it was really fun. And then one of the stations, the artists who came to our school to do this work with us, they did a puppet making station at True Colors. So the families get to meet them and talk with them and just be a part. It's another additional layer of kind of incorporating our residencies into our art nights. Last year we had a clay artist, Colleen Riley, who we did these pottery stacks that you'll see.
Because we have pictures of those.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe while you're talking.
That's Heart of the Beast.
Yeah.
And, okay, so here's, this is our clay art residency with Colleen Riley, and those garden stacks are in the front of our school now, and the children all help to create these garden stacks with her. They're beautiful. But at our art night, she came and brought her pottery wheel and threw pots while the children were working with their parents, working with clay and showing them all the techniques that they learned from Colleen. So again, just another element of weaving that in. I'm going to pass it on to you now. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Nancy Dennis. When art has changed a lot over the years at Prairie Creek, but it's always been a really important part. And one thing that's changed that's been wonderful, when I was hired 15 years ago, Caroline said to me, Caroline Jones was the director, and she hired me and she said, oh, and by the way, you'll be teaching art too. So I'm really glad to have someone like Angie. Because Angie talked about the fears that adults have as being artists, and I totally had those fears, and it's been such a wonderful journey for me and wonderful place for me, and it was great that I had to teach art, and Simon too. Yeah, he did, and we tried, but we didn't do as well as this wonderful teacher does. So I have been more of the structure person. So we have these wonderful arts residencies, and we have had them over the years, but it was always sort of, oh, we should do something, so what are we going to do this year? What are we going to, when can we do it, and try to find someone, and it was very last minute. So a few years ago, we started an art subcommittee, and we had been in conversation with St. Olaf about doing an opera residency, and as a J-term class for them. So it's actually a class for their students, which is really pretty amazing for us that we're part of their curriculum, which I think is pretty cool that their students get to come and create with us. So we had this wonderful residency 4 years ago, and we decided that we really needed to be more systematic about things. And so we have a 3-year cycle now. So we met with St. Olaf after the residency, and we decided that every 3 years would be a really nice space between doing an opera. You can't do an opera every single year. Well, you probably could, but we wanted to do different things. So we started doing, we're now having our second opera tomorrow, so I'm very excited that this has come to, it's starting, it's actually, the cycle is working. And in between, we met with, and our committee has parents, and Angie and I and another teacher, and we decided that we would try to focus on, looking outward. What do the children need? What opportunities are we not able to provide for them as teachers and in our own practices? What can provide professional development for teachers and for Angie in her practice? And that's when Heart of the Beast came in. And so lots of us, in fact, there's some paper mache going on right now in the school, but none of us, we weren't doing a lot of paper mache work before then. And then we wanted to have a local residency and see if we could connect with a local Northfield artist and do a residency, which is how the Colleen Riley residency came to pass. So we have been very, very fortunate because we also asked for a budget line on our annual budget, and we have a budget line, which made the difference to being able to know that we could do some planning around this and not having to constantly fundraise and figure out a way to make an arts residency happen each year. Of course, we're right now in the middle of writing a grant, and hopefully, we have written them over the years, and you know how that goes. Sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not, but we don't want the arts to be, when you're successful, you get to have a residency, and when you're not, you don't. So having our school board support the arts with a budget line has been to me, really, really important. So I think that's all I really wanted to say. But
We did bring this book that you guys can pass around if you want to look at it. It kind of highlights, this is our goal to do for each of our residencies each year, is to create a visual book for families who come to our school to come in and see the actual process and everything unfold. And this was one that we made for our residency last year. So it kind of helped to show that a little bit more.
okay, thank you very much.
It's just a picture from there. A couple of opportunities just before Barb takes over. If you want to see the arts in action at Prairie Creek, we have our opera tomorrow. It's here at your middle school auditorium at 7 p.m. And True Colors is March 9th, if you'd like to see what Angie was describing.
Oops, he had me all set. I'm Barbara Warrenson, and I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and thank you for having us, and thank you for authorizing this little gem of a school here in Northfield. I want to thank Bonnie Jean Flom, who connected me to Arcadia over the summer when I moved back to Northfield from St. Paul, and I just love being there. And I'll tell you why tonight. Tonight's presentation will include an introduction. I'm doing the overview according to our mission, because we have bullet points in our mission that you'll see in a minute. And as some of you probably know, I wasn't here last year. So I'm learning a lot. And this is a better way for me, I think, to organize the presentation. We will be doing a spotlight program tonight with Bob Gregory Bjorklund, whom you may know as Rock and Roll Revival guy, among other things, the director. And then I just have a little bit of data to talk about. The Northfield News was kind enough to write a story about Arcadia and their new director, me. And it included a sentence that got me into a little bit of trouble because it seems to imply that the school was actually looking for an experienced Warrenson. As we were working on these PowerPoints, I got an email from Simon saying, "I'm having a little trouble with this PowerPoint. I think I'm just not an experienced Tyler." Which cracked me up. So, my son Stu said, "Well, I'd finish that for you, Mom, but I'm just not an experienced Warrenson like you." So what is an experienced Warrenson? So since I'm not really new to your community, but I may be new to you, I have a doctorate from the University of St. Thomas, and I have been operating as an executive director since 2005. Prior to that, from the early 90s to 2005, I taught in the Northfield Public Schools. And I think one of my first jobs, probably my second job actually, was teaching under Bonnie Jean out of Greenville, so older than dirt. I'm also the parent of an Arcadia student. My youngest son, David, started the first year the school was in operation in 2003, and I had the great joy of helping to plan. I didn't play a major role, but I sat on committees. I was excited and gave him lots of support. So I feel like I'm coming home, and that's great. And my youngest two, I should tell you, were at Prairie Creek in the 90s, and this is your third opera, because we did the Magic Flute with Caroline Jones. And I remember sitting there in the audience and thinking, I can't believe I'm watching my 6-year-old in the Magic Flute. So it's wonderful. So this is our mission. We won't go through the whole thing because we're going to go through each of those bullet points and show you, what I want to do is show you how this actually plays out day to day, because you see mission statements and they kind of all blend together. But we really work hard to advance our mission. We're working hard on it right now. I'm going to skip over the first bullet point, which is we encourage and assist students to express themselves artistically, because I'm going to let Bob talk about that when we get there. So we'll move that down to the bottom. So one thing that Arcadia, formerly Artec, takes very seriously is technology, and we want to use it and teach the kids to use it responsibly, creatively, and with innovation. We started out with a computer for every child, and I mean in 2003, when David, my youngest son, started, we went out there and on the desk there was this big computer monitor, back in 2003, on every single desk. It was wonderful. He said, this is what the future is going to look like, and of course it does. Everybody's got it now. Kids bring their own devices, and we teach them to use them responsibly, and we did a presentation the other night, and one of the high school students at the end of it told us to all take out our cell phones, and she told us how to hook up to the app cahoots.com, and we did, and we all took a quiz, and I won. We have Lego robotics, classes for computer coding. We try to integrate technology into all the core courses. We have Apple TV, Google Classroom, all this good stuff. Online supplemental instruction for some students. So we're working hard. Right now, our language arts teacher, Scott Grave, is working with Laura Stelter, who is a board member, but also an ESL teacher at Shattuck. And the two campuses are doing a co-teaching project, and a lot of it's online, some of it's field trips, some of it's just developing as it goes, but it's all technology. Third bullet point is develop critical thinking and creative problem-solving skills. We do use a project-based learning process. The kids learn how to ask the essential questions, how to conduct the research, and share a final project. So on the top, these pictures are kind of hard to see, but is a high school student giving her presentation on a stage with her PowerPoint behind her. It was very interactive, and we would expect that level of quality from a high school student project. The the picture below shows, I'll show you. This is the student right here. And all these people are his classmates. So they present, first of all, to their classmates. And over here are the advisors who are writing comments on the presentation. And then once a quarter, we have an evening presentation night, and they give this to their parents. And it's well attended, and it's quite the deal. The kids in the middle school have themes each quarter based on what they're reading and for their books in language arts. So this third quarter, the theme is the future. They start out in the fall with poster board displays. For the first quarter, second quarter is PowerPoint, so there's a million PowerPoints going on, but they've never done it before. And the third quarter is to create or make or do something. So they have to put on a play or, whatever they want, an interpretive dance. And then the fourth quarter is a social service project. And they need to find it and do it and then share it. Construct knowledge and meaning for themselves. What you see here are both science labs, actually. I hadn't realized that, but on the right, they're doing a chemistry experiment that they have put together. And on the left, I think they're actually doing a health project. But the projects we found that, and the research will back this up, that if the student generates the project, it's much more effective and the learning is much more powerful than if I say to them, you need to do a project on, or why don't you do this? So for the high school students, it's sometimes challenging to make sure that they're getting what they need to have according to the standards, and for college, and at the same time they're selecting their own learning and learning experientially. We understand and strive for wellness of their whole person. We do physical education. We have the class. We do it at the Y, which is really nice for us. On the top is a cooking residency. We had a chef come in and actually cook with the kids, with the students. On the bottom, this would go under emotional health and mental health, I think, but we, on alternating years, offer a trip to Wolf Ridge. And it looks a lot different in May than it does in January when they go in 5th grade. Building strong families, building social skills. We have a social worker at Arcadia who's actually leading groups to teach social skills for those students who need that. And I got to tell you, every middle school and high school student needs that. So they're pretty popular classes. We also have a wellness committee to organize all that. We recognize and act upon the responsibilities as local citizens within our global context. We have solar panels and a greenhouse now, so we're studying renewable energy all the time, sustainable living. Social awareness is a big part of what we do. On the top, which you can hardly see, they are in the swamps, and they're studying water and wetlands. And on the bottom, they're planting a tree, which is pretty hard when you're middle school. I love this. But so many of our kids take this so seriously. We've had many students leave to go to the marches this last weekend. And Red Rock, they've done that, and they will come back and they'll make a project out of that and talk about it with all of us. So what does a typical day look like for an Arcadian 7th grader? They have 3 main components: class time, playtime, and project work time. And you can't see this, but on the bottom, they're outside playing. On the top, they're all around a table. And those tables in the course of the day get pushed aside, and then all the chairs come in, and you see they're doing a project presentation. The flexibility of the space, you'll see a circle pretty soon, and what you don't realize, that's all the same room. So we actually have 4 large classrooms, 4 large rooms. 2 for the high school, 2 for the middle school. The high schoolers have their own desks. But the middle schoolers have lockers and otherwise are constantly moving and changing we also have 4 additional smaller classrooms that are dedicated to classrooms. Excuse me. This is a morning circle. The middle school uses morning circles for about a half an hour every single day. The kids come in, and this was, all the teachers in the middle school have been trained in developmental designs, which is part of the responsive classroom, but for middle school level, designed by Linda Crawford, a former Prairie Creek director. So it all comes back. She was the director when my kids were there. But here, they come in, they write something on the board, and when Bob comes up, he can maybe talk more about this because he does more. But if you have questions, he's got enough to talk about. They talk about a little bit of, the idea is that they leave whatever stresses and drama has happened before they came to the school in the morning. They leave that at the door so that they can come in and start out, focused and ready to learn. So they do a greeting every day. They just go around the circle, shake hands, look, eye contact, the whole thing. They play a little game. They talk about the topic for the day. They do announcements. So it's nice. So it gets them settled for the day. And now I'm going to give Bob a chance to do this.
So at this point, I usually ask my middle schoolers, do you need to stretch for a minute? You can do that. No? Okay, all right. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. And it's kind of fun because I can see that I'm going to talk about the arts, of course, that I'm also talking to an actor and singer and a number of other singers and a poet and parents of dancers and actors and singers. So I know I'm in good company here. And if I get this right, then I'll be doing really well. So in improvisational theater, there's a concept that says, say yes. And what it means is when you're on stage with a partner and doing a scene, and that partner throws out some unlikely idea, your job is to say yes and go with it and make the scene move forward. So that, I think, is what we're doing at Arcadia. I think we're saying yes in a lot of ways. We're building relationships with artists, with arts organizations. We're definitely focusing on experiential learning in the arts. And I've got this great opportunity at Arcadia to create all of these arts opportunities. And I've been able to do that from year one as the school's arts coordinator. I'm now full-time as an advisor and teacher and arts coordinator. But I'm here to tell you about the arts. We have, of course, classes in all of the artistic disciplines, but I'm going to tell you about some other things in the arts. First of all, I'll answer this question. Back earlier in art tech's time, people would say, well, are you a conservatory? And no, we're not. We never have been. And I've never thought of us that way. And I don't think any of us really have. A conservatory, visual arts students thought, well, you can't get into the school without a portfolio. And that's not true. We're a public school, just like the Northfield School District is. So we're not a conservatory, but here's the interesting thing. I'll give you an example of a guy named Joe Koala. Joe Koala and the Flying Foot Forum, a dance company up in the Twin Cities. Came down and wanted to do a residency with Prairie Creek and Carleton and St. Olaf. And they called and said, hey, would you guys be interested in this? And I said, let me think a minute, yes. And so Joe came in. So Joe's a dancer. Well, do we have a school of dancers? No. But we have 126 kids total, 72 in the high school. Of that group, 36 of our students said, yeah, I'll give that a try. So there's this saying yes part. which I really love about our school. This fall, Stuart Pimsler Dance Theater came down and did a dance residency. We had 19 high schoolers who signed up for that. Of those 19 high schoolers, 12 of them were boys. And I think that says something also. So it's that say yes piece. So how do we encourage students to express themselves artistically? I don't know if you saw that, but that's the first point in our mission statement. And I guess that's why I got hired. Well, I'm going to tell you some of the different ways we do it. And run through really a number of lists for you, just so you can hear some names. One area is residencies, partnerships, workshops in all areas of the arts. I'll give you some examples. A number of years ago, Dessa came down. Very interesting story, but she did a writing workshop, kind of before she really got big. She still had some time to do that. Ragamala, an Indian dance company, we partnered with Carleton to do that residency. Flying Foot Forum with Prairie Creek and St. Olaf and Carleton. Chris Koza and Rogue Valley came down a couple years ago now, right, Bonnie Jean, and did a workshop with us, and we created a whole piece utilizing all the areas of the arts. And that was in conjunction with the Northfield Senior Center, with the Northfield Arts Guild, and with the Northfield Arts and Culture Commission. Right, Bonnie Jean? Yes, yes. Mac Gimsey has been in. You folks know Mac. He's a great asset to the community. Gao Hong has been in to do music. You know Gao Hong, of course. We've worked with the Guthrie with a program called Schools on Stage, and with Vocal Essence. In fact, we're going into our third year of a great program called Witness. Let me know if you'd like to talk about it later. The Cole Center for Dance does distance learning. In other words, they'll Skype a teaching artist into your classroom, and we've worked with the Coles for a number of years. Children's Theater does a program called Kid Centricity. Schools across the state, middle schools, elementary schools, are able to work in conjunction with the artistic staff. In our case, they're creating a performance of the Sneetches. And so they're giving us video questions. So I'm the scenic designer. So how do you picture the star on and off machine? And our kids get to answer. So all of these types of opportunities. We do field trips at Arcadia, and our kids do field trips well, and they have from day one. In both theater and dance, when we can, we integrate our field trips into the curriculum. An example, this fall, our middle school project theme was the Renaissance. So we went to the Ren Fest, the end of September. A few years back, we went to Kill a Mockingbird at the Guthrie. Saw a young man named Isaac Lear in that. And of course, we studied the book before that, the book and the film. Also, so we spent time at the Guthrie, at Park Square Theater, at History Theater, at the Ordway. Great program. Ask me about that one later. Also, the Cole Center for Dance, as I said, and also Children's Theater, as I mentioned. We do productions. We do performances. Thanksgiving is our annual fundraiser, and it's a crazy fundraiser. It's a great evening, and it really includes all of our kids, and I think that's saying a lot. We have done a theatrical production since we opened, from the spring of 2004. Some both middle school and high school together. Some separate. Some examples are in Here at the Wind. Oh, good gracious, this is what I've missed. There's We Dance, We Love to Dance. Here we are on theater. In Here at the Wind, we did a lot of years ago, The Mouse That Roared, a fun little comedy. Oliver Twist, that was both middle school, high school production. The Laramie Project, that was very much a high school production, with a cast of 17 of our students, along with five adult actors from the community. Peter Pan, that was both a high school and middle school production combined. The Complete Works of William Shakespeare Abridged, we just did last year. And that's a fun show. Next slide, I got it. So, we'll all agree that the Northfield School District has a wonderful music program, right? Yes, okay. And our Arcadia students are really fortunate to be able to come and play in the orchestra, in the band. And we really, really appreciate that. Our kids benefit from that. So I consider part of my job at Arcadia to find areas of music that may not be as explored in the larger community. So Gao Hong fit in perfectly in that case, and there she is. Chris Koza and Rogue Valley. These are, it's a great group. They came down, we got to create with them. One thing that I do is I teach African drumming, that some of you may or may not know. And so we look for ways to do music in those areas. In the same way, we develop other less explored areas in the arts? If I make poetry one of those areas, I'm not sure, Rob. But I want to talk about the fact that we do a program called Poetry Out Loud. We have for a number of years now. Rob has been one of our judges and supporters. And Poetry Out Loud is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts. We laugh because there's one area where we compete at Arcadia, and that's in poetry. It's very interesting. So we send kids regularly to the regional competition and then to the state competition. And our school of 72 high schoolers, that's how many we have, has regularly placed in 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th place in the state. So we've developed that area also. And finally, I need to say that from day one, we have had a dance program. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And it's led by Sherry Setchell, which makes it even better. So let's see. Here we go. Finally, this is something that I started, I guess, 14 years ago now. And we were a new school, and the community needed to meet us and needed to get to understand who we were and what we're about and what was important to us, and realize that we share so many of the same values. So the Arts for Martin came out of that. The phrase that I use is gathering community, creating art, and celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. So the arts bring the evening together, all areas of the arts, and artists from the entire community, and that's important to us. I asked artists the question, not just who's Martin Luther King and what did he do and all those questions that we always go through, but why is he important to us here and now? So here in Northfield and now in 2017. And the evening is a reflection around that with all of these artists. And some of our presenters, Fred Doty, I don't know if any of you who remember Fred, Joseph Mbele, Father Denny Dempsey, Reginaldo Hasselt Marroquin, Mary Moore Easter, Sharif Keita, the Latino playwrights have been in, Matt Gimsey once again, Judy Dirks, the Northfield Senior Center Encore players, and the list will continue next year. So the arts are alive and well at Arcadia. Think about relationships, think about saying yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Bob is such an integral part of Arcadia, and the arts at Arcadia would not be the same without him, so thank you. I just have 3 more slides, so hang with me. This is not in your data packet. What you see on the left, I think you can see this. Charter schools are required by law to compare themselves to a comparable size school, but also to the district in which they are situated, which makes it a little crazy because we have 126 students and you have 434. I don't know, no, that's the state. You have many more. But we have to do it, and I think this slide looks good for Arcadia, so I think it's worth sharing with you. On the left is our math proficiency for last year, well, from 2012 to 2016. The top line is state, The middle line is the Northfield Public Schools proficiency, and the bottom line is Arcadia, and it's lower. But what I want to point out is the growth. Can you see how far we've come? And we're gaining every year. So we're meeting those math goals. The one on the right is the reading proficiency, and the state is the bottom line here. And both Northfield and Arcadia are very high on reading. So I'm not going to do that one. So Arcadia's been recognized by the state for sustained student academic growth. They have not awarded us the celebration eligible school this year. I don't know for sure that they're going to do it, but we do meet all the criteria, so I'm expecting that we will. We have already been notified that we have been awarded again the highly qualified charter school status. What that means really is that if we want to expand or replicate, the state will allow us to do that, and they will support us with a rather large grant. But we're not interested in expanding, and we're not interested in growing or replicating. We are interested in being a small school right here. I'm going to read this to you. This is a stirring testimonial from a mother, and this is very recent, just within the last few weeks. One of our teachers had asked the kids to talk about their collegiate accomplishments and what they wanted to do for future endeavors. This is from a parent of an Arcadia senior this year who's doing PSEO. My son just told me about the synopsis Arcadia is requesting of its recent graduates, detailing their collegiate accomplishments and asking for details on future endeavors. I would be remiss if I did not say what I am about to say. Please feel free to share it or not, in part or in whole, as you deem appropriate. I just really needed to share it. My son came to Arcadia in the 8th grade. He had attended public school, and while he fared well academically, he was suffering socially and emotionally. While public school at times recognized his achievements academically, it ignored his social emotional development, and in fact was punitive in his identity as a gay transgendered teen. This negligence was caustic to his academic work, as he was unable to continue to progress with school if he had to continue to suffer for who he is. Then we came to Arcadia. Arcadia opened their arms to him and not only supported him and challenged him academically and creatively, they also encouraged him socially and emotionally. The faculty and staff regarded him as a whole person, not just as a scholastic number. In doing so, he flourished. He became engaged, he questioned, and with the support of Arcadia, he sought answers and he blossomed. It was because of this support of his whole being that he believed he could seek out and excel at some of the highest collegiate institutions in the country, and so he applied. It was his university of choice, Boston University, that not only accepted his entrance into college, but offered him an academic scholarship of $48,000. Boston University saw the same potential in my son that Arcadia had instilled in him beginning with the first second he stepped through their door. It was with the support, both academically and emotionally, Arcadia gave to my son that led him to believe he could become a success, and that support guided him to believe he could accomplish whatever he sought to do. For this and much more, I must say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you to everyone at Arcadia for their unending support, academically, creatively, and socially of my son. The love, acceptance, and creative academic approach of Arcadia faculty and staff encouraged my son to move forward to his fullest potential, and for this I will be forever grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you for welcoming us and welcoming me back to Northfield and to the Northfield school community. Thank you for authorizing us, and I hope reauthorizing us in the coming year. And I just will tell you that I am enjoying myself tremendously, and I will do my best to fulfill the high expectations you all have for an experienced Warrenson. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excellent presentations. We do now have opportunity for questions, either to Simon Tyler or Barbara Warrenson, or any of the other presenters. Is there any questions or comments? Ellen?
So I have a couple observations and then just one question. So I guess thank you so much for the presentations. I was really excited to hear about the arts. I think there was an op-ed in this morning's paper about innovative learning and sort of superintendents advocating for, instead of having funds being put into so much assessments, think about how innovative learning. So I was really excited to hear both of these presentations, and it was just really infused with sort of ideas of innovative learning and connecting the learning to social context. So I really appreciated that. So the one question I did have was back, it's probably, both of you are QComp schools, and we've had that come before the board. So I'm curious about your experiences, and I was particularly intrigued because, Simon, you talked about how you were really focusing in on the math growth, and that was the one thing that originally I was going to ask about, but you already presented that your plan is to really use the QComp and the coaching to focus on math growth. So I would just be really curious about both of your observations about what sort of the success of QComp at Arcadia, because you've had it for a while, and then Simon, you're only 4 months into this model, but any observations that you could share with the board?
It's interesting. The QComp is alive and well at Arcadia, and it involves peer observations and peer coaching. And this year we're making a big effort to combine all of that data with our own, with the teacher evaluation process. So it becomes a clear QComp. And we're also concentrating on math and student engagement. That's all I can say about Arcadia. We're just beginning. I think we alternate every other week. I'm just beginning. Every other week with a staff meeting or a QComp meeting. During the QComp meeting, the QComp organizers, the QComp chairs will do a presentation. And they're dynamite, and they actually are modeling the instructional techniques that we want to be using in the classroom. So I think that it's wonderful how they're doing it, and it's very much a part of our program. I have been at schools where it's not that way, and it's kind of an afterthought, or it's a big headache, and some teachers don't want to participate, and you have to have 100% participation and so forth. So QComp, I think for our school, is embracing the real spirit of QComp and doing a really great job. Works well in our environment.
Ellen, I think I say that the rise in our math scores had a lot to do with QComp.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should definitely qualify that we're just a few months into our program, but I was director at Arcadia for 3 years, or ArtTech as it was then, and I learned a lot about the QComp model there. It was already in place, and I think that's what interested in pursuing it for Prairie Creek with the faculty, that you could do it in a small setting and you could design the program to work within your existing structure. As far as the math piece goes, I think one of the sort of mandates is the school-wide goal. So it made us look at our math map data a little closely, which is a fairly new thing for us. And as Bob said earlier, the MCA data is tricky for us in a small school because of the small cell size, the growth. For us, we're talking about 60 kids, so you can get wild swings. We've learned a lot about Math Map as a tool that's more student-centered for us. So that's why we wanted to make our QComp goal, and QComp gives leeway to use assessment tools other than MCA. So that was a nice fit for us. So we've established a growth goal for the year for fall to fall with NWA MAP, and we have a contractual goal of 50% of our students over the course of a contract, which is sort of a NWA standard for annual growth. So I think what it'll do is, certainly in future presentations with you, we've got a baseline here, and then the support for our professional development focus around, this year for us, a lesson study process, which is really teachers in a very in-depth way examining how they design lessons and the number talks practices, which is a well-supported instructional tool for children's number sense capacity growth. The two things we're doing, how that'll affect the data in an assessment, that's going to play out for us. But I think the QComp support has provided a place for us to go there. I would say for us as well, the other piece in our learning about QComp that really, the faculty basically make a decision about whether they want to engage in this. It's not just my decision. The faculty have to decide on a majority vote to do this. Was that there was enough evidence that it didn't just have to be about the one curricular area. We certainly hope it impacts the instructional practices in math and their student growth in a very positive way, and expect it will. But the peer coaching is very much about the whole teacher, and the teachers can establish their own goals for their classroom students in areas beyond math. And that's something we wanted to be very clear with the process. Lots of teachers do set goals around math areas, but they can also set literacy goals or in other areas that support their own professional growth. So it's a new process for us, but I've seen it work at Arcadia, and so far the signs are encouraging for us.
Great, thank you.
Board members, other comments or questions? Amy?
I just wanted to say that my daughter Jabria went to Prairie Creek for 6 years, and she was blessed with the opportunity to study both with Nancy Dennis and in other ways with Bob, and it has been a tremendously positive experience that will have lasting impact throughout her life. But as far as the arts go, that program has always been strong and instilled in her a love for theater, music, and art that she will also take with her. So I wanted to thank you all for that important piece of her life and making such a big difference to her.
Excellent, thank you. Other comments, questions board members have?
I just have one
Yes,
piece.
Dr.
So
Newman.
having had a chance to do full-day site visits over the past couple of years with previous Superintendent Richardson, I think that a lot of people can come forward with a glitzy presentation and might wow folks, but I can tell you I've seen all of the things that were shared here in action, and really the fact that these schools are small and have maintained and managed their growth is really what allows them to do a number of these innovative pieces. And if you think about it, we hear a lot about charter schools throughout the country, but Prairie Creek and Arcadia, I think, harken back to the Minnesota law, which was the first charter law in the country about innovation in schools. And I think that these two schools were exactly what the authors of that original charter law had in mind. Very impressive, very much living mission, and it's a piece that anytime that you're in that building, I've been in each building now a couple times this year, and you see that in action every single day. Also want to really just call out that we will be seeing Barbara again here this spring, just as we saw Simon last spring, because we are working through the charter school renewal process with Arcadia. Simon and I, Barbara, met last week again just to look at the timeline on where we're at, and then on January 31st, Simon and I and Chris Bussman, who is a middle school principal in Farmington, also the president of the Minnesota Middle School Association, will be the external review team this year and coming to Arcadia to take a look at their programming and provide some detailed feedback. So we'll see more of Barbara, but that renewal process is important because we'll be doing the contract with Arcadia, and we'll be asking you to vote on a 5-year renewal yet this spring. So just so that we're letting you know that's coming forward.
Okay, excellent. Any other final questions or comments? All right, I just would like to, on the behalf of the board, to thank everyone who took their evening to be here. And it really is a proud thing for us to be able to support the excellent schools and the choice that you offer our community. So thank you for all you do. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Ellen.
So I was thinking, since we have another meeting after this meeting, and we heard these two wonderful presentations, that maybe I could move that we take a 5-minute recess before we move on to the thought exchange.
Okay, there's a motion for a 5-minute recess. Is there a second? Is there a second? Second by Margaret. Okay, we have a motion and a second for a 5-minute recess. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we will recess for 5 minutes. When we return, we will begin with discussion of thought exchange. We are in recess.
Okay.
Okay, so following our 5-minute recess, we'll now reconvene and begin our thought exchange discussion.
So on the, do you need to do a motion to come back in?
I don't believe I
Okay,
need to
very good.
know.
All right, so on the line here, coming to us live from British Columbia, Kaylee, could you remind me what city you're in?
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia.
So Kaylee Metcalf has been our main thought exchange contact this fall. As you know, this is our 3rd thought exchange engagement, and what Kaylee is going to do for us is she's going to give us an overview of the top thoughts and a handful of pieces about the process. She'll do a little bit of demonstration of some of the web reports. Board members received an email message from me with some direct links to some of the reporting tools. So without further ado, Kaylee, if you could take us through. I think Ian might be with you too, if you want to introduce Ian as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having us today. Again, my name is Kaylee and I work with Thought Exchange to facilitate conversations like this one. And yes, we work in teams at Thought Exchange, and my colleague Ian is also on the line.
Good evening, everyone.
So he may jump in once in a while. As you can see on the screen, we're starting today with some sample thoughts that came up in this thought exchange process. So I'll give you a few moments to read them. So we talk about this engagement as continuing the conversation. As many of you are familiar with, this is the district's 3rd thought exchange process. And this conversation was modeled on a similar process that took place a year before it. In fact, we used the same questions, and this has given us an opportunity to look over time at what your stakeholders are talking about and what they prioritize. For our agenda today, we're going to start with a brief overview of the project. We'll talk about what top thoughts are, and then we'll dig into your results to see the top thoughts and themes that rose up in your conversation. And lastly, we'll talk about some of the next steps that are happening. So our window of participation took place from the end of November until mid-December, just before the holidays. And we had 7 thought exchange processes or conversations, and this included parents, guardians, staff members, and community members. I'll note too that this conversation was accessible for participation in Spanish across all of these conversations as well. We started with the first step, the share step, at the end of November. This is when we invited your stakeholders by invitation email to share their thoughts in response to 3 open-ended questions. Then we invited them, whether they participated in the share step or not, to consider the ideas of others and assign stars to the thoughts that were most important to them or that resonated with them the most. And now we've started what we call the discover step. And the discover step is more multifaceted. This is where we analyze the results at Thought Exchange, we provide tools to leadership in your district, and we help share out the results with your community. All of this we do in a way that makes sense for your community and allows you as a district to move forward with actionable information. As I mentioned, we asked 3 open-ended questions, and these were exactly the same as those we asked in the fall of 2015. We call this our weather report approach, and it relies on very open-ended questions that allow participants to share what is top of mind. We saw 798 people participate in the share step, the STAR step, or both. So these are unique participants. And they shared over 1,331 thoughts. So if you think about each thought taking 1 or 2 minutes to be shared, it's a lot of time spent engaged with this topic. And if you think about perhaps this happening in a town hall style meeting in a room, you can imagine your community would be talking for a long time. We also saw over 53,000 stars assigned. This is a really exciting number to consider as well. It represents the number of times participants reviewed and placed value on the thoughts of others. And when we look at a breakdown of the demographic groups, we see that the majority of those participating were parents and guardians. We saw about 13.5%, or exactly 13.5%, I should say, of participants indicate that they were staff members, so 108 staff members. And then we had 15.8% of participants who indicated that they are both a parent and guardian, or parent or guardian, and a staff member as well, so in that dual role answering our questions and assigning stars. And then we saw a few community members during the process as well. Before we dig into the results, we want to talk a little bit about what top thoughts are. First, in the thought exchange process, we make sure we recognize that all thoughts are important and true for the individual that shared the thought at the time that they shared it. So we recognize that someone took the time to take part, and even if the thought is, say, factually incorrect or doesn't resonate with us ourselves, we remember that it is still important to that participant. Second, the top thoughts are those that were important to participants during the STAR step. These are thoughts that participants placed value on and therefore rose to the top as priorities. And third, simply reading the top thoughts is a powerful place to start and return to. At Thought Exchange, we offer various tools and ways or lenses to look at the results, but we always try to remind districts that looking at the top thoughts is a very valuable place to start. With this background, we're going to move into a high-level review of the results. We're going to be looking at the top themes and some thoughts that came up in response to each question. And I'll be showing you what we call a Stars and People report or a web report to explore these themes. After that, we're going to look at the areas of conversation across questions. I'm going to show you a snapshot of another tool. And then the last piece we're going to look at is an overview of that year-on-year comparison. So I'm going to just switch my screens here. And what we're seeing here is what we call a Stars and People report. We have 2 main sections, and we're going to start down below. And this is where we can explore the themes and thoughts that rose up within each question. And we can do so by navigating across these tabs here, if you can see my cursor moving. We'll start by looking at what came up when we asked participants what they appreciate. The theme we saw rise to the top was teachers and staff. So participants were assigning a lot of stars to thoughts in this theme, over 5,000 as you can see, and 436 people did this. By clicking on this little plus sign, I can see all of the thoughts, particularly if I press on the maximize button. We're seeing some example thoughts that really rose to the top with a lot of stars assigned to them by participants. We can sort the information using these columns. We can sort by the amount of stars assigned, the amount of people who assign stars to thoughts, and we can also look at passion. So how many average stars were assigned. We see participants assigning stars to the school environment. And so in this theme, we see participants talking about their appreciation of inclusion, diversity, and the open-mindedness of the school community. And they also are showing appreciation for organized events and activities that promote school spirit. We're also seeing appreciation for leadership and management as a top theme that came up. In particular, participants are appreciating communication from principals and assistant principals, as well as their efforts to address concerns and create positive school environments. And overall, they seem very appreciative of the leadership they see in your district. I'm going to jump over to question 1, and this is the question where we ask participants what their concerns are. Now, seeing the top concern that came up, or the top theme, sorry, with concerns that was starred the most is class size. So participants are expressing their concerns about elementary class sizes, in particular large kindergarten sizes, and the impact that this has on individual learning opportunities for students. We saw student discipline and character development rise to the top here. Some of the topics in this theme include a preference for increased adult supervision, particularly before school and those hours. Participants also expressed concerns for bullying, racism, topics like that on school grounds and in social media. And there were also some concerns about chemical use among high school students. Third, we saw the theme advanced learning opportunities rise up as well. Participants shared concerns about the lack of support for accelerated learners, and in line with this, they started thoughts about increasing these opportunities for advanced learners. Just giving a brief overview, of course, there's lots of information here and lots of other themes that you can dig into. In question 3, as you remember, we asked participants for their questions. And this is a great question to ask participants because it really shows where there are opportunities for further communication in a district. What do participants want to talk about more? And so we see when we ask this fairly general question, the top 2 themes that come up are surrounding facilities. Generally, participants are asking questions about the plan for facilities, how the poor physical conditions, some particular ones, are going to be addressed. Particularly, participants asked about improvements at Greenville Park Elementary. And they're asking about whether there's a long-term facilities plan or what are the opportunities for even maintenance in the meantime. There was conversation around repairing or rebuilding the high school. And another top theme that participants started questions around were curriculum. So participants were asking what the process is for the district when they adopt new curriculum. And they also start questions about particular programs, various programs in the district. You'll see that top thought in this theme is about the district reading curriculum, for example. That's a high-level overview of the top themes that came up. There are also some tools up here for filtering the results. I'd like to point out the search bar. We can use that when we look at the results. And there are also other ways to filter by demographic group to understand what priorities of different groups are. I'll jump back into my presentation. And you'll see we've summarized the topics that came up here. So if, as you recall, under appreciation, we saw teachers and staff, school environment, and leadership management as the top themes that rose up. Class size, student discipline and character development, and advanced learning opportunities were the top areas of concern that we saw. And we saw participants asking and starring questions around these three themes. Next, we're going to look at the summary themes or areas of conversation in this engagement. And this is a snapshot from a tool that we call interactive bar charts. And what we're looking at here and what we're talking about when we say summary themes are areas of conversation. What our analysis team has done is grouped those smaller granular themes that we just looked at into larger buckets to help us get a sense of what people are talking about from a higher level view, or a 10,000 foot view, if you will. So what we're seeing here is that the largest area of conversation in this engagement was teachers, staff, and leadership, with facilities, funding, and resources as the second largest. So again, we're looking at the largest number of stars assigned to areas of conversation. Another view that we can see with the interactive bar charts is one that compares across questions. And so what we're looking at on the left-hand side of these bars in orange is the number of stars assigned within question 2 for each of these summary themes. And in the purple, we're seeing the numbers of stars assigned in the concerns question, so question 1. And when we compare across these questions, what we get a sense of is where there is net appreciation or net concern. And what I mean by that is we see here how for teachers, staff, and leadership in this summary theme, there were far more stars assigned to, within the appreciates question to thoughts that show appreciation for teachers, staff, and leadership versus stars assigned to thoughts in the question that asks for concerns. On the other hand, we see that learning environment is a summary theme that has, or that can be characterized as one with net concern. These are powerful concepts that we can use as we compare across years to understand the analysis or the conversations that are happening in your community. And so what we're looking at here on the left-hand side in the dark blue is the net stars assigned either in appreciation or concern in 2015, and then on the right side in the lighter blue we're looking at 2016. Appreciation, you'll see, is on the top. Net concern is on the bottom. So I'm just going to give you a very general sense of how to look at this. And then we're going to sort of look at a list of some of the changes or some of the differences that we see between 2015 and 2016. What we typically use this tool for is just as a way to highlight some of the ways that conversations are happening over time. And this really is a tool or a roadmap into the actual blocks themselves. So where we see changes, it's just a way to indicate where we should look for more information, look to see what your community members are saying. So I'll show you a few things that pop up here for us. If you look on the right-hand side here, we're seeing a theme, teachers and staff, an area of net appreciation that received more appreciative stars to more appreciative thoughts this year That's what this is indicating right here. More appreciative thoughts this year, or more stars assigned to appreciative thoughts. We're also seeing next to it here for parking and traffic, we're seeing an area of net concern, so where there were more stars assigned within the concerns question, but that actually decreased in 2016. So there were fewer stars assigned, fewer net stars assigned here. On the flip side, for class size, also an area of net concern, we saw more stars assigned in the concerns question. So that's just a broad sense of how we can look at this image here, or this tool. And again, our analysis team has pulled out the themes that have, where we've seen change over the 2 years. So themes that fell in that net appreciative category where we saw more appreciation in 2016 include teachers and staff, as we saw, school environment, leadership and management, and curriculum and programs. So these are the ones where we saw the most appreciation increase. Net concerns, those themes that became less of a concern in 2016, as we saw parking and traffic, technology, and facilities and infrastructure as sort of a general theme became less of a concern in 2016. Themes that were of net concern that became more of a concern in 2016 included lunch and recess, and student discipline and character development. And then we also saw some themes emerge this year. So you just heard me say that facilities and infrastructure decreased as a concern. Well, we actually saw some more textured themes pop up this year. So under facilities, we saw more stars assigned to thoughts about concern thoughts about school capacity, preschool facilities, and that theme we looked into earlier about repairing or rebuilding the high school. We also saw some themes emerge around concerns about hiring and retaining quality staff and about teachers' workload as well. So again, this is just a sort of a high-level overview of some of those changes, and it's definitely important to actually go in and look at what's being said in those themes. Talking a little bit about next steps, and then we'll ask for some questions. But we've provided some resources to your leadership. There is a working with your results document, and we also have a Discover What Matters site. So we call it our Discover site, and this is a place where there are tools available for you as you dig through the data and think about your own next steps. We're also working to develop a results website. As I mentioned, part of the Discover step involves analysis, and another part involves sharing the results back out with your community. And this is something that Northfield has done for their last 2 engagements, is share out the results in the form of the website. And so that's something we're currently working on as well. And I'd just like to take some time to see if anyone has questions for us today.
All right, Kaylee, thank you very much. So board members, questions, comments? Rob?
Okay. Hi. I have a question about the curriculum and programs part of it. I spent a lot of time this weekend looking at that, and it said, in the presentation you just gave, you said the curriculum and programs were more appreciated more in 2016. But my alternative fact would be that they're more of a concern, because they seem to have moved up from rank ranked number 28 in stars in 2015 to number 10 in stars this year, and there are also more questions about them, which I think you covered. And I'm interested especially in what you mentioned about the reading curriculum, because that came up in 2 of the responses to question 1 and 2 of the responses to question 3. And in question 3, the questions were kind of, I think they were really concerns phrased as a question. When will we adopt a reading curriculum? That sounds like a concern, that they're seeing a lack of something, so they're concerned about when we're going to get it. So I think there are different ways that it looked to me that when you put together all the stars that were just around reading curriculum, there were 315 stars just on that concern, which would bring it up, just reading curriculum alone would make it number 15 on the list of concerns. So that was my kind of different way of reading this data. I'm wondering, to give that a positive spin, whether when you get really specific questions about reading curriculum, for example, can that be taken as evidence that people are actually becoming more informed and engaged about the issues because they can pick out things like reading curriculum that they might not have been thinking about before? And then the other thing I was thinking is that sometimes you have things that are areas of appreciation which come with a flip side of concern. For example, there's great appreciation of the breadth of the curriculum, but there's also the concern about maintaining that breadth. So sometimes you have to read concerns and appreciations together. That's all I have.
Kaylee, do you want to talk a little bit about the curriculum and programs and how the clustering or the thematic approach could include things other than just curriculum?
Sure. So absolutely. In curriculum and programs, I mean, there are quite a few different programs that come up, but what I love hearing is that you've already started digging into the results and using sort of our themes, gone deeper, and sort of seeing the texture that's within that. I don't know if I'm answering your particular question about that, but certainly one of the best ways actually to look at the data is to look across the concerns and appreciation question, and then that third questions question as well, because that will offer you sort of a broad view of what people are saying about that theme.
Yeah, and Kaylee, I'll add to that in the fact that one of the things that I think is key is that there is a handoff that thought exchange does to us. So of course, if you're familiar with the Delphi survey method, which I am partial to in the fact that this is a modified Delphi survey method, thought exchange is able to do an amount of work in a period of time that we could never do ourselves, in terms of having folks look and develop themes and those kinds of things, and the algorithm to make sure that all of the thoughts are seen by a similar number of people. So Rob, what I would argue is you, as Kaylee had mentioned, you have really started our next step. It's up to us, to make the meaning from those pieces. And so the kinds of questions that you just asked are the same kinds of, Kaylee, just because of the way the timing of this one, normally what we do is have our leadership team see this presentation first and then you see it. Just the way the timing was with board meetings, you're seeing this first. Aaron Bailey and I got to see this last week so we can be prepared. You're going to see it, and then on Wednesday of this week, our leadership team will have a chance to see it. And those, if you have observations or questions or things like that, if you would share those with me, our job is to start digging into those. And coincidentally, what I find completely fascinating and energizing is the fact, if you think about a number of the things that Kaylee brought up tonight, that this is nothing that we did, this is what the public starred, right? The 700 and some people who starred. Many of them are things that are part of our strategic plan. And so, for example, on the reading curriculum side, a lot of these things are going to be relatively straightforward to answer. We actually had our first district-wide literacy team meeting right in this room last Thursday with about 30 teachers, grades K-5, in terms of looking at all sorts of different ways that we're looking at how can we attack making sure that we are providing the best updated pedagogical and curricular resources for our teachers to teach one of the most foundational skills. So we're really pleased that it came up, because what we think is that that's going to provide some energy and synergy around that K-5 reading curriculum group as they move forward, because of course that comes under our part of an ongoing priority of robust core curricular instruction. So those are the exact kinds of things, and then as a leadership team, and then you as a board, helping us look at making sure that the things that we're looking at and synthesizing from Thought Exchange are directly tied into our strategic plan and how we're moving forward. What's great is I like to call a number of these things what I would call low-hanging fruit. So there's some low-hanging fruit of some things that people just maybe aren't aware of, or something that maybe we haven't communicated well enough to the community to talk about some of these issues. One of the things that I'm pleased to see is that, as you know, we did a major project that Jim Kalseth, our Buildings and Grounds Director, shepherded to add that lane over at the middle school. Parking and traffic, while no one would say it solved, was reduced in the amount of concerns this year. And if you remember, one of the major reasons this board voted to move ahead of using our capital fund balance to add the middle school lane was based on the data from Thought Exchange. So that's an example of how there was pieces that we had concerns, we moved forward, and my hope is next year at this time, the things that we're going to hear are going to be hearing the appreciation about some of the work that we did around the reading curriculum, some of the work that we have done around social emotional curriculum, because you saw that that has come up and really validates what we have said about doing that, as well as a number of other pieces that are coming down the line. We've also seen this year a handful of new harbingers appear of areas where we need to take a look at. For example, lunch and recess didn't show up at all last year, and yet there are some concerns about this year. Why did it show up this year? Those are questions that our leadership team are going to have to ask and try to triangulate with what they're seeing in the building on a daily basis. So you couldn't have teed it up better, Rob, because that's exactly what we need to do. Kaylee can hand the ball to us, and it's now up to us to be able to take and say, of these pieces, what are the things that we can reasonably attack in the next year? And I think the good news is we already have a plan to address or to discuss almost all of them, including the facilities piece, which, despite the fact that I know that we've adopted a facilities plan and the fact that we've communicated that the facilities plan has been adopted, it appears that there's a number of people who are anxious for us to get going maybe faster than what we had originally intended. Does that help answer your question and expand upon it?
Excellent, thank you. Other questions, comments? Amy?
Hi, Kaylee. This is Amy Gerwitz. I'm the new person on the board. And I'm also a parent, and I participated in Thought Exchange, and it's a very exciting process, and a lot of good information has been collected, and it's fun to hear Dr. Hillman talk about it, because he's clearly excited. But I have a question about the methodology and how the starring system that weights everything. And I'm hoping you could explain this to me. So, obviously, with 1,331 thoughts contributed, people can't put stars on every thought. That would be too much to ask of people. So, and I may be wrong here, but you randomly choose which ones people are going to star. Is that correct? And then they have to star those thoughts, and sometimes there's 6 or 8 thoughts at a time that they have to divide their stars up. Some of those thoughts are similar because maybe 100 people commented on how great the staff and faculty are. But there would be other comments that might equally be important, but only 3 people said them about athletics. But because things are randomly chosen, I might not have seen the athletic comments, is this true? But I might have seen a lot of the comments about the faculty and staff. So I end up dividing up the same stars between the same topics, but not getting the full spread of all of the different topics that the comments covered. Is that right, or am I missing something?
I can jump in and talk to this one. This is Ian. It's a great question. So there's two things at work in the background that would speak to this. So we have During the star step, you as a participant, so one thing is you'll be guaranteed to see your own thoughts. You will also see, it's essentially a random selection of other thoughts, but our system ensures that all of the thoughts are seen about an equal number of times. So there is a way that we ensure that the thoughts are seen almost equally. Another thing that the system does is we'll look at the thoughts themselves, and this is done automatically. So there's it applies what we call a thought diversity algorithm. So basically, it ensures that thoughts look very similar. We try not to show too many of those thoughts that look very similar. Now, of course, if there is a topic that is top of mind to a lot of people, that thought will come up more often. The stars that are assigned to that thought or similar thoughts will be reflective of the fact that that thought comes up more often. And that's what happens then is those thoughts will be put into themes. So if you have, we often get lots of thoughts on class size, for example. You'll get lots of thoughts on class size in various different ways saying the same thing, which is okay because they'll all end up in the class size theme. So I think if you take that into account, is that helping to describe the methodology? Was that the question
Yes.
that you were asking?
So then my question is, have you ever compared the number of thoughts in a certain topic and the ratio to how many stars they get? And is there sort of a direct correlation between, you have so many thoughts in this topic, you're going to get so many stars. And if you have only 3 thoughts in it, you're going to get that many fewer stars. And I think all of the comments are great and fair to see. I'm just curious about the weighting system.
Well, we don't actually have a weighting system per se. It's the thoughts that resonate the most with get the most stars. Because you have a scarcity of stars, there's only a limited number of stars. You really have to. So on any star page, I don't know if everybody has seen it, but on a page of thoughts, you'll have 9 thoughts. You can give up to 5 stars per thought, and you have only 16 stars. So you can only assign the maximum amount of stars to a few thoughts. So even if there is only 1 or 2 thoughts, or one thought that is very different from all the other thoughts, if that resonates with everybody that sees it, it will rise to the surface. So, that's the weighting is what comes from the priorities that the community assigns to that thought. We don't do any additional weighting. The other part of that too is that things are then themed together. So overall, when you look at the report, you can get a sense of, there may be 1 or 2 thoughts that really got a lot of stars, but you look at the themes and you get a better sense of the overall conversation.
The other thing, just if I can share, I think one of the other things that I look at when I'm reviewing the data is there's something that they call a passion score. So we can also sort it by thoughts or by themes in terms of what was the average number of stars given by all the people who starred it. So we may have a thought that maybe only 10 people starred, right? But if all 10 of those people gave it 5 stars, that's going to be something that we're going to look at a little bit more closely because for that small group of people, it was very passionate for them. And so we may not be able to do anything about it right now. We may look at it and say, okay, this is something that's small, but we may want to communicate a little bit more about it. So I might use a blog post, or we might try to find a way through one of the principal's newsletters to share some of that information. So I think one of the other pieces that can help us is even though there might be some thoughts because they were only shared by a few people, if a few people starred them at a very high rate, we're going to have the opportunity to take a look and see, okay, for this small segment, even though it doesn't necessarily rise to the top of being talked about significantly, for this group of people it was very important. We may go and look and see, can we identify, was that really coming out of one site? Was that coming out of one group, say maybe a parents and staff? Is there a way that we can look at to try to determine, is it an area of focus for us in terms of if we look at one part of the district, is this something we can try to solve there? So I just think that's another piece, Amy, that we look at to try to help make sure that we're making meaning of the results.
And that makes a lot of sense. And the one thing I would ask about that process is if there's a lot of people, who, if there's 10 people give 5 stars, but 10 people saw it and didn't give it any stars because it had no relevance to them, does that still pop out as we had, the people who did rank this gave it 5 stars?
Well, and again, I think the key thing there is that we're trying to make meaning of it. So even though it's a small, even if 30 people saw it and only 10 people started it all, and they all gave it 5 stars, we may not be able to put a lot of energy into it because it may not have risen to the top of the but it's a piece that we're going to be aware of in terms of that. And so while it's a power voting piece per se, the fact is that it's our job to interpret those pieces and see what are the things that we can do the best to try to to really make meaning of those things and to be cognizant and aware that may be an issue. I can't tell you how many times last year after we gave the weather report how I had a conversation or heard from someone, I'm like, oh, I read that in here, and now I have some more context to it. So it is, what I like about this is the fact that we get more texture to those pieces, and while this might be passionate for this group of people, it may not be something that we put resources to, but we're at least aware that there's a group of people who feel very passionately about that. And that, when we have discussions and decisions, we may take that into account, as we look at that.
Thank you. That helps a lot.
Okay, excellent questions. Other questions, comments? Margaret?
I feel like I'm in kindergarten.
Can you
asking
be
this
sure
one.
to-
Yeah, I feel like a kindergartner asking this one now. The demographic, is that a good representative sample?
Is your question, is that a typical breakdown of the demographics?
Yeah, is it adequate for us to base our decisions on?
I think the way to look at the demographics is as a way to, so the quick answer is yes. So the way that you look at the demographics is to focus in on the specific thoughts from those demographics and how they were prioritized. So in terms of the numbers that you have, I'm not sure if I'm quite answering the question that you're asking, but in terms of the numbers that you have, I think you have sufficient demographics. Maybe the community members is a pretty small number there too, but the parents and guardians and the parents, guardians, and staff members, that breakdown in terms of the number of people, I think gives you a really good way to filter out and focus in on those demographics, and there's sufficient representation there for that to be a really good lens to look through.
Thank
Margaret,
you. You answered my question.
And I would just add that if you think about, we always have thought about Thought Exchange as kind of a digital, they call it a digital town hall meeting. And in our old way of doing surveys, we would rarely get this many people participate. In fact, we'd be lucky if we'd get half the people to participate. And I am often reminded of the quote from whom I can't remember right now, but maybe somebody at the table, that decisions are made by the people who show up. And so if you think about some of the major decisions that we've made in the last decade based upon public meeting participation, this far eclipses how many people have shown up to some of those meetings. And so while, I think from a statistical perspective, we could debate whether or not we have a representative sample in those things. When you think about it as an addition or an augmentation to a town hall or an open meeting kind of format, I think that we are really getting a strong number of people. And if you think about when you add the staff, the parent, guardian, and staff together, we usually say we have about 550 employees, roughly. So we have nearly half of our employees in one way, shape, or form contributing to this. So that's pretty important. And if you think about when Skylar sends out a message, we send out an email to about 4,000 students. So 500, or 798, or the 500 of the parents and guardians. Again, I think if you get 25% or so of anybody to come forward, I think that you're, or even 15%, you're looking pretty good.
Yeah, I was just looking at the breakout too.
Yep.
Is 2% of community members a good percentage?
We have room to grow on that. And if you think about our community meetings, we rarely get that many community members. We continue to use all of the resources that we have. We even sent it to new lists this year, but that's an area for growth for us yet.
Thank you.
And I will comment that it's not unusual for us to see 1% or less community members of a percentage of the participation. So that's not unusual at all. It's really hard to reach those community members.
Thank you.
How are they approached?
So with the community members, well, we don't have the community members' email addresses, but we do have our students' email addresses and we can directly connect with them. So we reach out to our community partners. So for example, Northfield Rotary, with over 135 members, sends this message out for us where people self-register. The Northfield Chamber of Commerce has sent out, to us. We have given it to the newspaper, for them to be able to publish. HCI is a partner that we added this year for them to send it out to. And the Senior Center is also. So, we're using the groups that they won't give us their lists, understandably so, but they will send a message on our behalf to their lists.
Nice. Okay, other questions? Ellen?
So I just had a comment in digging down particularly into the facilities and reading some of the comments and questions. And I feel like in some ways we might have primed this because last spring we had a thought exchange that just focused on facilities. And then when you dig down, it's a lot of, okay, now what, you asked our opinion last spring. We saw you approved a plan. What's next? And I guess, there was a lot of nuances to that, and you could kind of tell which buildings they were at and what concerns they had. But I just feel like as a board, we may want to address that piece of it.
Actually, if I might comment on Ellen's comments, I actually had those same comments myself. A couple things that I think was heartening for me to see just overall is that we had increased our participation. The very first time we did it in 2015, we had 1,104 participants, and then we dropped back to 584 when we did the master facilities. So it was really great to see it build back up by a significant number. But to kind of talk about what Ellen had said, that was one thing that I had really noticed and what had come to the forefront. And I think one of the strengths of the Thought Exchange program is that we're able to really address actionable items. And I think it really does, as one of our selling strong supportive thought exchanges, that we can continue to develop that strong level of trust with our community. And so I think towards that end, as I was looking at the number of comments we had around the master facilities plan and people really wanting us to look very short term in terms of how we might address some of the things coming, the master facilities plan itself. So what I wanted to do, and I think Ellen is suggesting as well, is that we sort of take a moment to discuss the potential of really addressing the master facilities plan maybe in a board work session, and something that we could convene short term and just have the board with obviously Jim Kulseth and Val Mertsdorf as part of a work session potentially to really come together as a board in a work session and talk about what we might want to do short term in terms of the master facilities plan. So I would appreciate the opportunity for board members to weigh in as to whether, again, based on what we're seeing in Thought Exchange around facilities, is there some interest in convening a work session in which we could really delve into the master facilities plan and talk about what some short-term or really exploratory stage in terms of what some of the next steps in terms of the master facilities plan might be. So I would look to any board members to comment or discuss. Margaret?
It's a great idea.
Okay. Any other comments about, Noel?
In my movement through the community, I'm astounded at the number of people who address me and saying, well, I see the school board has already made a decision to build more schools. Tear down the high school, build a new school. And I correct them and I say, no, that's not where we are. They say, well, that's what I read in the paper. So there's another issue. But the concern is that I think we need more, the community needs more education. They need to understand where we're going. I've always said on projects, you need to have the scope of the project, the cost of the project, and the time frame for the project. And the community needs to know that. Without that information, they're going to draw their own conclusions, which may or may not be accurate.
Excellent comment, thank you. Other comments or questions board members would have about a work session? Rob?
My only question is how it would, is this on? My question is, there was the facilities advisory group being formed and how this work session would interact with the work that they would be doing.
You know, Rob, what I think is that, remember that we are looking at forming that we've actually already extended some invitation to members. We're getting ready to be able to put that together. I think a couple of different ways to look at it is the Facilities Advisory Committee we've set up as a long-term group to look at both the building life cycle management portion of the plan and the 10-year plan. So, you know, that group is going to be a long-term ongoing group. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, remember that anything on the building life cycle management plan, or truthfully the 10-year plan for that matter, but the big questions that I think we're seeing coming out in terms of the building life cycle plan, those at the end of the day do need to be decided by the board, you know, in terms of what's the actual next step. And so I don't think there'd be any hurt in having a work session, you know, around it, because I think that would give the board the chance to discuss it further, to make some determinations about, is there anything in the plan that the board has the will to go forward with, or to, you know, delve deeper in terms of a timeline or those kinds of things. Or the board could also choose to say, you know, what we really need to do is say to bring this back to let the Facilities Advisory Committee handle this to begin with. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having a work session to say we've got the master facilities plan approved. We have the Facilities Advisory Committee that's getting ready to go. But we heard so much in the thought exchange piece that it's worth it for us to take a little bit of time, specifically on one night, to talk about that and then make a determination. Facilities Advisory Committee, you take the whole thing, or, you know, we need to take this part right now and make some decisions about the timeline moving forward. So it doesn't take the option off the table, Rob, you know, but what it simply does is helps clarify, given additional and new information, what's the next course of action.
Great question. Other questions or comments board members would have about the surface discussion around a work session to address master facilities? Jeff?
I think a work session is a good idea, and also, excuse me, you know, as many invitations that you can extend for public comment is fine. If people want to engage, they can engage. If they don't want to, you know, sometimes people are more comfortable with the call or the invitation, but I think we do plenty good jobs of over time of giving people an opportunity to give their opinion. I just think that what people mostly will engage in is just, you know, problem solution. And obviously, you know, I think what I learned about schools is if you can get 50 years out of a school, for the most part, you're doing pretty good. So I mean, and as far as the planning process on this school, which I went to, you know, we need some steps and define what that process is and how we'll make a decision to move forward and do something or not. And that turns into be years. We're already at, you know, 52 years, and then construction costs going up. And I'm sure there's arguments for and against, but, you know, my goodness, I mean, sooner or later, instead of, you know, you want a 1965 car and keep throwing money back at it, or do you want to, yes, it's expensive to build something new, but we got to make those decisions and move ahead. And I think that engaging the public in giving a timeline and then giving however they want to give feedback and making some decisions on what that timeline looks like and what decisions we need to make over that time is the path we need to take, obviously. And a work session is a good idea.
Okay, great. Thanks for your comments. Any other board members want to weigh in? So am I sensing that there's support for convening a work session around that? Okay. I would then, I'm aware of some travel schedules that board members have towards the latter part of February, so I would ask Danita if we could just poll board members for within the next couple weeks if there's anything realistic. Otherwise, we would have to move towards the beginning of March. If there's some dates that we couldn't secure within the next couple of weeks. Does that make sense?
Looking at the calendar, you know, I think there are a couple of dates in the next couple weeks. I'm not sure about board members' availability, on Wednesday evenings, February 1st or February 8th. or if you wanted to, because then I think then you're talking about some pretty heavy-duty travel schedules amongst board members. So
Correct.
they'll probably have to wait till March.
Yeah, if that early part of February doesn't work, then I know based on board members that have shared their schedules with me, we would have to then go into March. So do we want to just take a straw poll if anyone is aware of their current schedules, if either February 1st or February 8th? And then we are, obviously set for 7 p.m. start in terms of board meetings, but we could always adjust a work session to begin earlier in the evening, 5:30, if that works for board members. And Dr. Hillman, what would you imagine the length of an initial work session to take?
I was going to put a joke
Yeah.
in here, but it's not the time to joke
Oh.
at 9:30. So I would say that we would want to limit ourselves. I think a 2-hour work session
Okay.
is going to be plenty fine, and we don't have to use the entire time, but I think we certainly don't, I don't want to put it at 3 hours,
Yeah.
but I think a 2-hour time frame would be reasonable.
Okay. So if we could look, if the board's amenable to a 5:30 p.m. start to go till 7:30 p.m., maybe just take a show of hands if for February 1st? Oh, okay. It appears that we would have to,
Let's take a look at the 8th too.
yes,
just to
and
see
then
if-
let's do a show of hands for February 8th. We also need,
I'm not available on the 1st.
So
okay.
the 8th would, if
So-
we've got everybody available
and-
on the 8th.
We're fortunate that Jim Kulseth is here this evening, because it would be board members, Dr. Hillman, Val Mertsdorf, and Jim Kulseth, is I think the
So it looks
group.
like February 8th.
So-
is the-
Okay,
Can we-
she wasn't available on the 1st?
No. So can we take another show of hands for February 8th? Okay.
All right, looking good.
Excellent. So at this point, if someone's should get home and discover that they have a conflict, we do want to be sure that every board member would be available. So at this point, we could secure February 8th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. And Danita will have to determine what room we're in, but we will correspond or communicate that room with everyone. So excellent. So again, I think an opportunity to really directly address what the community is asking us for. So unfortunately,
So
Kaylee and Ian.
we actually just took our first
Yeah.
action step. You got to be happy with that.
Fantastic.
Okay, so I guess before we let the two of them go for the evening, fortunately, it's not as late on the West Coast as it is here, but we don't want to let them go until we find out if board members have any last-minute questions for either of them.
And just to
Okay.
be clear too, we have access to Kaylee. She is our process facilitator. So Aaron and I have really worked extensively with Kaylee. If you have specific questions or thoughts about anything that you read, any of the reports, I would be your first line of communication. And then if there's something that I can't answer in collaboration with Aaron, we will go to Kaylee and we can get some very specific analysis. But like I said, this is really the handoff to us. And now it's our turn to make the meaning of it. So I just want to thank Thought Exchange again. It's by far the best community engagement tool that I've seen in my career, and I've tried about as many of them as are out there. So I'm really pleased and want to thank Haley and Ian for their time tonight.
Thanks for having us, and following up on that, I just want to say that we are here to support you as you go through your action steps, and if you want further analysis or have questions, so feel free to reach out.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one closing comment for Dr. Hillman. Thank you for sharing the data links with us. I think as board members, those were extremely helpful, and I think we'd be remiss in not thanking the 798
Absolutely.
community members, our stakeholder groups who took the time to respond. So, and I think that as a board, I think I probably speak for all of us when we say, as we continue to go through this, and Amy, unfortunately, this is your first go-round, but as our third one, I think we're all getting and feeling a lot more comfortable with how it works. So it's been a really great process for us to be able to follow it through and now see where themes are emerging, and it's excellent, and I feel much more comfortable as we continue to work this process through in terms of what it means for us as a board and how we, understand what the community is saying to us, so.
And we anticipate that the community portion of the website will be available later this week. And what I'm planning to do is I'm trying to send a district-wide message to parents at the beginning of each new quarter. You might remember back on November 4th, I sent something, we'll be sending something next week. And our hope is that the data will be ready by then, and we can actually just share the public link with people. Then we'll also start to use school building newsletters and the superintendent's blog to start to address some of the things that have come up.
Okay, excellent, wonderful. Okay, so now we will move on. We are still at items for discussion and report, believe it or not. So we will do the last item for discussion, which is the financial forecast for 2017-18 General Fund Budget Plan. Val Mertsdorf, Director of Finance, is here to present.
You can just, yeah. Then you're in the dock down there, all the way to the bottom to the right. Keep going down. Down.
Down where?
It doesn't
I don't
show on
see
the
anything
screen.
else.
Go all the way to the bottom and it'll pop up the dock.
Oh,
You're the
all right.
PowerPoint right there. To the left. There you go.
Not a Mac girl. All right. This one
Right there.
is, right? This one?
Yep.
All right. Oh, look at me going already. Sorry. All right. So, good evening. I am going to talk a little bit about the financial forecast and the budget plan for the 17-18 school year. Just a couple things I'm going to cover are kind of the financial cycle we go through, what are the items that we do know, there are several that we don't, our current enrollment projections, the financial assumptions that we are choosing, and then the 17-18 budget parameters, and then the budget presentation timeline for the spring. So coincidentally, February 1st, I'm actually teaching a class for MASBO about financial forecasts. So I've been diving into why you should be doing a financial forecast and all of those things. And so I took the opportunity to add this financial cycle, partially because we have a new board member, to kind of give her a feel of the process that we go through, but also just to highlight that I think, and while I'm slightly biased, I think one of the things that our district does really, really well is financial stewardship and transparency. And really the purpose of a financial forecast is to evaluate your current and future fiscal conditions, to really guide your policy and programmatic decisions. And this is kind of how we go about doing that. So currently, it's January, so we are doing the financial projection. We have just done the revised budget in December, and we are now looking at what is to come. And I take the revised budget when we've got our October 1st enrollment, our staffing is pretty much complete, we've got the audit done, and use that as kind of our base for our financial projection. And then with the legislative session starting and enrollment projections, that all kind of gives me the framework to move forward into what I think our budget looks like for the 17-18 school year, the next school year. And then throughout the summer, after the budget's been adopted, we basically finalize our fiscal year. And then in September, we have the levy process and then our audit. And then we take our final audited data and roll that over. And so the thing I really like about our process here is that I'm able to consistently communicate with not only you, but to be transparent with the community as well about what's happening, that we're consistently having a process to review our data and make sure that we're on the right path. So what we do know is that we increased the general unassigned fund balance about $1.3 million, primarily due to the increased enrollment that we've seen. Enrollment drives over 70% of our total revenue sources, and we have as you're aware, seen steadily increasing enrollment the last 2 years. About 80% of our budget is salary and benefits. And our revised budget for 16-17 had revenues and expenditures of roughly 50 million, so we basically have a balanced budget currently. Our enrollment projections are really showing an increase. The last 2 years, as you can see, we've gone from just over 3,800 to 3,869 to 3,922 to now we are projecting ending this fiscal year with 3,980. So that is well over 100 student increase. And the enrollment projection actually now has 17 different calculations instead of 10, all of which I analyzed and choosing one that's more conservative. But when you've got a 50 student increase 2 years in a row, it changes what your model looks like. So we are projecting an increased enrollment through 18-19. So we're looking at potentially another 37 students for next year is what the current enrollment projection looks like. And then just a couple of notes. The APU, the adjusted pupil units, is the actual weighted calculation, and that is what the revenue formulas are calculated on. And in 14-15 was the first year of the simplified weightings. So that's why it kind of looks like it dropped even though we had more students. So some of our financial assumptions, our fund balance goal is 16% unassigned expenditures, or as a percentage of expenditures. One of the assumptions I have built in is that we are intending to grow the new long-term facilities maintenance fund balance. Our long-term goal would be likely to bring down the capital fund balance, as this will really kind of replace what we had identified that for. And the long-term facilities fund has a larger revenue pool, so it makes more sense to have a larger fund balance in that category. Some of the major revenue assumptions that we look at, obviously the per pupil basic funding. Right now I have a 0.5% increase on that funding formula. Obviously we don't know what's going to happen, and we typically don't know until the very last day, but most people have been less than optimistic in the discussions that we've had. So we do have it at a 0.5% currently. We do have the referendum inflationary increase, and I have that at 1%. It's been just slightly over 1 the last 2 years. I have a 3% increase in special ed funding. The statute does allow for a 4% increase each year, but there are some other factors that they can use to mitigate that. And the formula's obviously complicated, as I've said a few times. So just to be conservative, I have it as a 3 instead of a 4. The long-term facility maintenance revenue is increasing it's a phased in for the 3 years, so that is part of the forecast, is the increase in that revenue source. So overall, looking at the 17-18 school year, we're looking at an aggregate increase of about 0.8% total for the revenue. And one of the reasons that seems a little bit low, because of the increased enrollment and those sorts of things, is because of the decrease in our special ed revenue because of the way the co-op funding is going to work. So we're actually going to have less special ed expenditures, but we're also having less revenue. So that's why it looks like it's only 0.8. So just wanted to point that out. Some of the expenditure assumptions, salaries and benefits, as I said, are 80% of our total budget. The aggregate increase is about 3.4% when you look at those together. I've got a 3% increase for health insurance, and that is primarily just due to participation. We are not anticipating an increase in our premiums. The self-insured health insurance pool is doing really well. but we have seen increased participation each year. And then 2% increase for all the purchase services and other non-salary type items. So our aggregate increase for expenditures is about 3.9%. So this is probably a little hard to see. I apologize, I probably should have printed that out a little. This is a one-page for you, but a couple things that I just want to point out are, as I said, the revenue appears like it's going down. The first thing actually I'm going to point out, I said our revenue and expenditure budget was 50 million, and you can see that this is obviously 47 and not 50. I excluded the 2.5 million that I have budgeted for the co-op flow-through. So this is just true Northfield actual expenditures and revenue versus kind of an inflated number. So just wanted to point that out. So the revenue is going down. That is because of the co-op and the way that that formula is going to change the way we handle the finances for that. Total expenditures, 47.5. So this is the revised budget. We are projecting to end just shy of 25% unreserved fund balance for this fiscal year. It was just a year ago that I was standing here saying that we were potentially looking at budget reductions for the 17-18 school year. As you can see, for 17-18, we are now projecting to end just shy of 21% and then 17%. I cannot stress enough how the increased enrollment has dramatically changed the budget. Each student generates, somewhere around $9,000, and when you're talking 100 kids that we have coming into our district, that makes a significant impact on our revenue. The same goes the other way. If our student enrollment were to decline, it happens just as fast the other direction. So while this is a great forecast to have right now, and I'm very happy to be presenting it, I just want to make you aware of that. We've had 2 years of significant increases, and hopefully that will continue and maintain, and we'll have consistent forecasts, but I just really wanted to stress that point because it is very important, and it can, if you look at the districts that are struggling financially, it is typically because they have declining enrollment, and the formulas don't keep up that way. So overall, the forecast is really positive. We currently have a balanced budget, while we are looking probably to spend down the fund balance for the next 2 years. We're always hopeful that the legislature will come through and give us a little bit more money, but right now we're pretty stable, and we'll be able to continue the great programming that we have and continue to employ the great staff that we have. So the budget calendar, this is kind of just a framework. It helps keep me on task with my budgets, knowing that I have a deadline coming up. But just kind of a familiar structure for this. The one change that I will note is that in March, I will be bringing the operating capital and long-term facility maintenance budgets. I'm likely presenting that at the end of February for approval in March. We're still kind of working out the time frame for that. This is primarily so that we know we have the approval for the projects and can start getting quotes and bids and those sorts of things earlier. Because if we wait till we've typically approved it in May, a lot of the work has already filled up, and we would prefer to get the best pricing that we can. So that is a change for this coming year. But otherwise, it's pretty status quo for the presentation schedule. So with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Excellent, thank you. Questions board members have? Rob? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not sure whose hand went up first.
Well, thank you.
Amy.
I'm just the newbie, so this is a
Yep.
newbie question.
Not a problem.
Will you explain the SOD reserve percent and what that's a percent of?
Yep, so Minnesota school districts are required to do an SOD reserve calculation. So SOD stands for statutory operating debt. And by statute, if a district has a negative unassigned fund balance that is more than 2.5% of their general fund expenditures for the year, they are basically required, the board's required to adopt a plan that basically says how we are going to have a positive fund balance. So if this number down here is minus 2.5 or higher, or lower, whichever way you want to talk about it, basically the state's MD is going to come in and micromanage our process until we are in a positive operating state with a balanced budget. So that's not a position you want to be in. And so that's one of the reasons that we track it. The board goal is 16%, which is obviously well above the SOD calculation, and we would obviously never want to be in a negative position, but that's what the SOD stands for.
What's it a percent of?
Of the general fund, the expenditures. So for 16-17, they would take this 47,584,219 times 2.5%. So whatever 2.5% of that number is, if we had a negative fund balance, so our unassigned fund balance, I'm projecting to end at 11.8 million. So if that was a negative, 1 million, 2 million, whatever the 2.5% is, then we would be considered an SOD and have some formal processes that we would have to go through.
That makes sense, because I was looking for which number it was a percent of, and I couldn't figure it out. but
Of
that
the
number's up.
expenditures, yep. So this 24.96 is basically taking the 11.8 million divided by the 47 million. So that's 25% of the expenditures for the year.
And with our board goal reserve of 16%, that's intended to be the early warning system so that if we had a change in enrollment or some other factor that caused us to have budgets that were spending significantly more than what we're taking in, that provides the board an opportunity to correct that ship before we would get to the SOD piece. Our intent is that 16% number, if we drop below 16%, we're going to come to you and say it's time to do some budget adjustments. I call it the early warning system.
Okay. Yep. Rob, you had a question?
In your experience, how common is it to have a balanced budget where you're not drawing on the fund balance reserve at all?
Not common. It's pretty, it depends on the district and the circumstances. We obviously are very fortunate in this community. We have a very supportive community and a very strong referendum, which helps balance the budget. But I think it really depends. Typically, I see more districts that are talking about budget reductions and cutting this or that. So I think we're incredibly fortunate.
Someone asked me, why do you do it this way? Why don't you just run a system where you're only spending as much as you get? And eventually this is going to, if we keep doing it this way, it's going to keep getting lower as we see it going from 24 to 20 to 17 to 11 and a half.
Yep.
So, this person asked me, you're always saying we need more money from the state, and that's always unreliable, and then you have to come to the taxpayers. So the question was, it's not my question, it was just someone asked me,
yep.
Is it a wise thing to keep relying on a fund balance?
I don't know that we rely on the fund balance so much. I guess I view the fund balance as sort of our stabilizer. 70% of our revenue is coming from the state. And I think to continue to offer the strong programming and retain the high-quality staff that we have. If we were to offer a budget solely on what the state provided, our school district would look very different. And the community clearly values what we're offering and what we hope to continue to offer. So, you know, a 1% increase on the state funding formula provides us $250,000. Our total teacher salary budget is over 16 million. So it's difficult to, I think that, I think we would want to retain our staff and offer them a competitive package in those sorts of things. And if the state can't even provide an inflationary increase, that means that we can't offer that to our staff because they're 80% of our total budget. So it's kind of a balancing act, but I guess I don't see us relying necessarily on our fund balance. It's more of a stabilizer that allows us to continue to do what we're doing and not be constantly reacting with budget cuts to maintain a balanced budget, if that makes sense.
I just can't let this one pass, though. I mean, because the fact is that we have a fund balance because the state has chronically not followed the Constitution. The state of Minnesota Constitution has two requirements: uniform system of roads and a uniform system of schools. And I implore our legislatures to make sure you take care of those two constitutional responsibilities before we begin looking at all these other kinds of things that attempt to get on your session. Not that I am grandstanding or anything. The fact is that, again, just to remind people, the state pretends that there is no inflation. They pretend that there is no inflation. And to have the same buying power today that the formula had in 1991-92, the state would have to give us $2,400 more on the formula, which is roughly 40% of the current formula. So I always think the reason that we have the fund balance is because of the good contributions that Northfield community has done by giving us an operating levy that allows us to do some pretty cool things that a lot of other districts can't. But it's because the state has not kept up with their constitutional responsibility. And we will be saying that over and over. And so I apologize, I just could not miss that opportunity to say that.
Jeff, you had your hand.
Yeah, I mean, didn't you talk about before, I mean, we talked about, you know, financial words like, you know, prudent reserve, and I would say volatility buffer, and getting back to before that, when you look at that, I mean, the idea of best practices, and that's where you came up with whatever percentage to have in reserve for best practices. That's just good financial prudence. So, I mean, that would be a comment that I would have. And where did we get the number for in reserve? That came from some prudent, you know.
The auditors will say that they would like you to have roughly 2 months of 2 months of your operating expenses on hand, and 16% roughly equates to 2 months of operating expenses.
Margaret, you had a question.
Yeah, not just necessarily a question, I'm sorry, but a statement just to piggyback on Superintendent Hillman. Even if the state were to vote to give a substantial increase, say 3% or 4% even, it sounds really wonderful, but it's on top of years and years and years of underfunding. So we're way behind. So it's not like an increase is going to be, oh, wow, schools are fully funded now. We'll take it, but it does not in any way then mean schools are now fully funded. So, and I also wanted to then reinforce what Matt and Julie do with C, because I imagine schools like Bloomington and so on don't have to have this hyper focus on their fund balance all the time because they have such a commercial tax base to keep their schools going all the time. So the Schools for Equity in Education is working on that, because then towns like Northfield, without this commercial tax base, we're always scrambling. So I just wanted to thank you. I'm sorry, Val, I had to giggle when you said you use this tool to keep you on track. I don't think you need a tool to keep you on track, so you do a great job. So
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Any other last questions for Val? No? Okay. I would entertain a motion to continue the meeting past 10 PM.
Yes, I was going to move that.
Okay.
Continue past 10.
Yes, we are at 10 PM, so I would entertain a motion to move past 10 PM, of which Ellen has just made a motion to extend the meeting past 10 PM. Is there a second? Second by Margaret. Is there discussion? Okay, so the motion is to continue our meeting past 10 PM. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. So, I don't know if I interrupted anyone wanting to ask a final question of Val or not, so if you have that. Ellen, yes.
I had one comment, which was going back to the thought exchange. One of the themes that came through is that we do such a good job, Val does, of being really transparent. So it was clear people had anticipated we might be getting into budget cuts. So now that, I guess, having a financial forecast in front of us that looks like we won't be doing it this winter, that's for sure. So I think, Dr. Hillman, you already alluded that we'd be using sort of information in thought exchange and to educate through the newsletter. So it seems like this might be some piece of this.
Yep.
Thank you, Val, for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent, thank you. Okay. All right. So we have successfully worked ourselves through items for discussion and report. Now we'll move on to items for individual action. Board members, the first item being the Dundas Dome lease. Because it's an item for individual action, is there a motion to approve the lease with the Dundas Dome for no more than 90 hours at a total cost not to exceed $40,500? Moved by Margaret. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Okay, we now have opportunity for discussion and or comments. Anyone like to comment on the Dundas Dome lease motion? No.
I don't have it in front of me, but I noticed that there is language in there that said if for some reason you would have to give, I think, 6 weeks of notice.
It's a 6-month notice piece, and so I think what's good about that is that we are planning, to use this in the spring. So the 90 hours that we're anticipating will be used very quickly in the spring. We would plan to bring this, if there's any concern that we have, we would notify them that we're not going to renew the lease. We could always negotiate a different lease with them, but I think what I think is important about that is that it's going to really require our activities department to do a thorough review immediately of the use of the Dundas Dome and make a determination, because of course we can't go use the dome past, I think it's May 2nd or 3rd this year. There's a statutory limit to how long the dome can stay up, and so actually once the weather gets good, they'll take it down. The turf field would still be available for use, but I'm actually okay with that 6 months, because that's going to require us to make sure that we make a determination one way or the other.
I've had experience, as in the community, of 2 domes that went down overnight. What happens if their dome goes down overnight and we have to go find space somewhere else?
Well, I think the key thing is going to be that we have worked with them to create a payment structure and also being able to bank some hours. So let's say that we don't use all of the 80 hours this spring. They have told us that they will allow us to bank those hours for the next time around. So even if we ended our lease, we would still have 10 hours remaining in that.
Pursue the point though, if we can't go there to practice and there's no time in any other facility anywhere, we're pretty much out of luck.
I think, what we would do is we would go back to the scheduling that we have done for years up until now. So even if they had scheduled some additional activities, of course our spring activities are something that take precedence. And I know what Tom Groutman and the activity staff would do is they would go back, they would resurrect some of the old schedules, and basically we'd just have kids practicing later.
Good, thank you.
Why
did I think you didn't think ahead?
Other questions or comments? Ellen?
I was curious that the hours of over spring break, now hearing that we can bank them, so maybe if we don't have as many sports practicing over spring break, it would just get shifted?
This is what Tom did, Activities Director Groutman, is he looked ahead at the practice schedule and these are projections. So I do know that most spring sports do practice, over spring break, and so the fact would be that they may practice a little bit longer, but this is based upon Tom Groutman polling the coaches about what they're anticipating their practice schedule is going to be, but if it changes, we do have the ability to use those hours later.
Any other questions? Yes, Amy.
Again, it's a new question because I'm new. So the next time the lease is up, it comes back to us?
Correct, and so this lease is not unlike a number of our other leases, things like the hockey arena and things like the gymnastics club. You will look at that on a fairly regular basis once if it goes out, if the lease expires and we don't renew it, or there's not an automatic renewal language, it has to come back to you. So in this case, before we allow this to just continue forward, we will certainly make sure we bring it back to you and give you a report, because it's the first year of us doing the hockey arena and the gymnastics club. We've leased those spaces forever. But of course, we want to make sure, one of the things that we've said to you is that we have a chance to try a facility like this without having a long-term commitment, having to maintain it or those kinds of things. So what I will ensure that happens is in May and or June, we will certainly give you a report of where we're at, and if there are people who have concerns about moving forward with another lease, we've really tried to make sure that we've brought this forward a number of times so it doesn't catch anyone in the community by surprise that we're looking at this. But I think it's really important for us to take a good look after the first round and say, does it make sense for us to continue ahead?
Okay, so I just had 2 comments to add. I happened to see Tom Groutman today, and so we chatted quickly about this, and so a couple things he had reiterated again to me is he would be very judicious in using these 90 hours. It's not, oh, we've got 90 hours, we're going to use them. It's very much, we have up to 90 hours, but we'll be very careful in using these hours. And then I know Noel had asked about, and he addressed it in some frequently asked questions about optimal practice times and what we'd be able to secure as a district. And I know he has met with the coaches, and they are in the process of working through that with the Dome. And I would imagine some of it is contingent on this lease going forward. If we were to, the motion were to pass, then he would have obviously the ability to really begin that. But he's already begun that process of being able to secure optimal practice times for the district. So 2 other points to add.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the lease for the Dundas Dome for no more than 90 hours at a total cost not to exceed $40,500. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next item for individual action is the school board, the revised school board policy 501 around weapons. We had the first reading and discussion at our last board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the revisions to school board policy 501 weapons as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Rob. Is there a second? Second by Noel. Are there questions, comments regarding the revisions to the school weapons policy? Rob.
I just have a question, observation maybe on the revisions under 4A, so the top of the second page, where it's a student who finds a weapon on the way to school or in a school location, or a student who discovers that he or she accidentally has a weapon in his or her possession and immediately notifies a school administrator or takes the weapon to the principal's office immediately. Let's take the scenario of, I don't know, United South Central. You have a search of a locker, a weapon is found, a knife is found, say, and the principal calls the student to the locker and says, look what we found. If the student has actually forgotten that they have the weapon, then that's the moment that they discovered that they accidentally had the weapon, and they can just say, oh, I didn't know I had that. Doesn't that count as immediately notifying the administrator? I mean, you could argue that, because that's the moment that they actually realized that they had the weapon. So it kind of, that's a way of kind of getting around a stricter interpretation of that, I guess.
And I think, Rob, actually, I've thought about that particular piece quite a bit, because it's obviously comes up in terms of what we want to be careful about is, I think in this case I go to the standard we often apply, which is the reasonable person standard. And I think it's also going to depend upon what kind of weapon were to be found in the locker. So for example, let's say it's in the case that you referred to that the Supreme Court recently heard, you're talking about a small knife in which, the fact in our school district, there would have been some additional questions. You can't have that on our property. There would have probably been some kind of discipline, but you're not talking about, in that particular case, given those set of circumstances, that would be taken into account when looking at the disciplinary standard. And I think, I do agree with you. I think that what I look at is that immediately notifying doesn't mean after someone else has found it. To me, I look at it and believe that if your locker has been searched appropriately or those kinds of pieces, that if the administrator or the teacher or the adult in the building is the first to discover it, I don't think that we would be able to use the argument that it was immediately reported. I understand how some folks might use that, and having been a high school teacher and a junior high administrator for a number of years, I've heard many of those kinds of things over the years, and I think the key thing is when it comes to that point, we're going to work with the student based upon the student citizenship handbook. We're going to work with the parents. We're going to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We're going to take into account the specifics of the circumstance. And, again, the reason we're bringing the policy back is to make sure that our policy is in alignment with the most recent state Supreme Court guidance on the subject. And so I think that the key thing is, to me immediately, is, I realized I had it in my purse when I came to school, and I'm going and letting administrator know. But I would struggle as an experienced administrator for someone to say, I just forgot that I had this, and this is, if you're caught with it, I think that is the moment of where we have to take a look at what's the appropriate disciplinary consequence. And, at our high school, they do a very good job overall with that. But I realize that could be the argument. But we also want to make sure that there is a reasonable exception for, in fact, this happens more often than you would think. A student who works at Menards or might work at another, hardware store on a farm, and where they come to school and they realize, oh my goodness, I have this particular box cutter or this, and actually it doesn't happen every day, but it's a handful of times a year where someone comes to the office and tells one of our assistant principals, totally forgot I had this by using this piece. I would rather make sure those kids have the exception and deal with it on the other side than the other way around.
Okay, great question. Other questions or comments? No? Okay. So we do have a motion and a second to approve the revisions to School Board Policy 501, weapons, as presented. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Our last item for individual action is the award for the bid for the Bridgewater roof replacement. Is there a motion to approve the base bid line item number 2 for the cold process application in the amount of $1,338,750 to Peterson Brothers Roofing? Is there a motion? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Noel. Questions, comments? I see that Jim Halseth has been patiently here for going on 3.5 hours. So if someone has a question about the bid, I know he would be eager to answer it. Amy.
I'm just the newbie. Sure. And I don't know anything about roofing. When I first saw the amounts, I had some sticker shock. And so I thought maybe if you could just explain why it costs that much to do a roof.
It's the size of the roof. It's the process of tearing off what's there and replacing it with a new product. It's all the metal flashing that goes around the roof. It includes warranty. There's a lot of people working on the project, and it's just simply that's what the cost of these materials and things are now. And our bids actually came in, they were very competitive. We went out for bids early, and what we did was offered an early window of opportunity for the contractors. They're going to be starting in April, rather than starting in June and giving them that June through August window when all the roofing companies are very busy doing schools. And, that's the school window of construction is very small. It's that June 15th through August 15th. So by going out early and allowing them to start early, we actually got a better price. But I can understand the sticker shock of that. I did a roof on my house too, and trust me, it was a little more than I was thinking, but I guess that's the times that we're in.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Jeff?
I actually used to work for a roof consulting company, but I know that's very competitive. What do you think of the contractor that you got?
They come pretty highly recommended. I don't believe we've had them here. We haven't had them here since I've been here. But all the Garland companies that they work with are all on a similar basis. They all come very highly recommended.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? Okay, good questions, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve the bid for the Peterson Brothers roofing project at Bridgewater Elementary School. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we will move on to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were just a couple of things in the personnel items in the table file to be added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Ellen. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we will move on to items for information. One of the fun things we get to do every year is recognize our educational assistants with a recognition week, which in 2017 is January 23rd through the 27th, so this week. And so I'd like to read just a little bit about and provide some context to what our educational assistants do in our schools every day. This week has been designated as Educational Assistant Recognition Week. Educational assistants provide services in a variety of positions within schools, including support for instruction and individual students, student activities, and numerous tasks that contribute to educational success. The support and services provided by education assistants are integral to improving student achievement and increasing the effectiveness of Minnesota schools. Buildings are recognizing the contributions of educational assistants this week, and I know as a board we would wholeheartedly want to also extend our sincere appreciation to our educational assistants and the value that they provide as caring and dedicated adults in the lives of our students on a daily basis. So we thank them, and I know Dr. Hillman, you'd like to have some comments as well.
Absolutely. I mean, on the front lines every day, our educational assistants in this district are mostly working with special education students. The number of general education educational assistants that we've had over the years has dropped compared to what it once was. But you know, what our educational assistants do is they reinforce the primary instruction that the teacher is giving. They are a counselor to the students. They are making sure that they're helping them with organization and accessing the general curriculum, which is really important. A lot of our educational assistants allow students to access curriculum in the general education classroom as close to the mainstream as possible. And frankly, we can't do our work without them. So we are very appreciative of the work that our educational assistants do for the Northfield Public Schools and also for the Cannon Valley Special Education Co-op, an entity that we belong to.
Excellent. And we thank the buildings for the work they're doing this week to recognize their work. Okay. Also, item for information in your packet, excuse me, it was in the table file. No, it was in the packet. I'm sorry. In the packet was the school board committee appointments. So I wanted to thank board members for telling me and advising me on where they saw themselves as school board liaisons on a number of committees. And I know that it takes a great deal of extra time and energy to get to those meetings, and your participation in those committees is of extreme value to those committees. So we thank you. I thank you for your work and your willingness to step up and serve in that way. So lastly, now we'll talk about future meetings. Monday, February 13th and Monday, February 27th, both regular school board meetings starting at 7 p.m. in the Northfield High School Media Center. And we also this evening added a school board work session for Wednesday, February 8th, convening at 5:30 p.m. with the location to be determined. So I will remind board members that following this meeting, we'll be convening for a closed negotiation strategy session and meeting immediately following adjournment in the district office conference room. So with that, I ask for a motion to adjourn, moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. 10:19.